that's life. That's what all the people say. You're riding high in April, shot down in May. But I know I'm gonna change that tune when I'm back on top in June. I said that's life.
We have Andy Wehmeyer from AudioFrog with us today. I'm going to ask you to give the shortest version of your career into audio, and I am going to post a link to the podcast you did with Clifton on the Soundcuology podcast, because you go into extreme depths of your history of car audio, which I love. I love to listen to that. So thank you for doing that with Clifton. So can you give us the 2-minute version of?
Are you saying can we not do that again? But can we?
I don't want to. We'll put the link to that podcast in our podcast so people can go listen to it. But I want to give just the kind of quick rundown of how you got into car audio and how you ended up being AudioFrog.
Okay. Wrecked my dad's car, bribed him with a pair of crappy speakers in the back from the flea market to let me drive the car again after he got a new car. Got a credit card when I enrolled in college, bought stuff, installed in car poorly, delivered pizza. Friend gets me a job at Car Stereo Shop in El Paso. I suck. They tried to fire me a whole bunch of times, or at least wanted to. He talked them out of it. 10 years later, I moved to Austin and worked there for 6 months before Mike Giffen at Harman called me and wanted me to come to work for him. And I told him yes, and then I told him no, and then I told him yes, and I was about to get married, which was my first big mistake. So I finally told him no, and he wasn't taking no for an answer. And then after a bunch of hemming and hawing and people breaking chairs and whatever, I said yes. I went to work for Harman. I was super lucky because I didn't get to work with these people. I was a schmuck, man. I was the new car audio kid on the block, except I could sort of talk tech a little bit, but I had an office in close proximity to people like Sean Olive and Floyd Toole and Jerry Morrow and Greg Timbers and Mike Heiss and Brendan Stead, and also in the building were people like Don Keel, and then over at Harman Motive, which was the OEM facility in it was in Indiana, and I can't remember Martinsville, Indiana. There were all kinds of other super duper smart people, Neil House and Roger Shively, who was in LA some, and Richard Small of Teal and Small Parameters. So I got to ask all of these guys all of the questions that a bunch of people asked me. So I was super lucky. And that's the short story. That was the short story of Andy. Andy winds up at Harman. And then I left Harman because I got tired of being paid for working, started AudioFrog, and here we are, 8 years later or something like that.
That's probably the most entertaining 2 minutes of podcast we've ever done.
Well, that's the story.
I don't know if you've ever listened to what Matt and I do here, but this podcast for us is all about talking to our customers and talking to guys that are into audio, that were into audio back in the day and are trying to find their way back in and sort through brands that, once were great and now they thought they bought this brand of amplifier and it was good in the 80s and now it sucks and they aren't happy with their car and they aren't happy with the sound, and kind of we talk through what we do on a daily basis, designing and building systems, and how we guide those customers to help them figure out what they need and make them happy. And I feel like you are the epitome of that, because that is what you do on a daily basis. Andy I don't think anybody listening to this. Yeah, I don't think that anybody listening to this podcast I'm pretty sure everybody is aware of your brand and what you do to help people online. And I know that a lot of times you feel like you bang your head against the wall, but we're super excited to have you on here to help us help those people in the same way that you don't want to have to write 8,000 paragraphs, but you do on a daily basis all over the internet to help people. We want to give you that voice here, and it's the same thing that we preach on a daily basis. So
to piggyback what Gary was saying there is, I feel like a lot of car audio's key demographic is people who are 40 to 75, and they grew up with car audio, right? So the 80s, 90s, the heyday of car audio, they were a part of it. And some of them have been disconnected since that time period, and now they have something that they, have invested a lot of money in with their car, and they don't want just some asshole working on the car. And they also know that, technology everywhere else has exploded, right? So obviously they're trying to rekindle what they've had in what they know growing up. And I've had just multiple phone calls of that demographic this week of people who just haven't touched a car since the 90s. And they're curious about exploring that and what that entails. And this podcast was really built to kind of educate that type of crowd on why we have to install the things that we do to get better sound. Because in 2021, we can't just, fucking throw speakers in a car and make it sound better, because there's so much other shit that has to happen, right? And my view of you, Andy, is you are one of the most passionate people, and I think everyone would agree with this.
Except for Manville Smith. He thinks I don't have any passion whatsoever, and he reminds me of that on Facebook all the time. Nevertheless, hi, Manville.
And it's funny, he was on the last episode. So you're following Manville's episode. But my view of you, Andy, is you're one of the most passionate people deep down when it comes to audio. And what you know and what you understand and what you've learned over your career, you obviously take the time to convey that to numerous people, communities, enthusiasts, installers online, right? And some of the stupidity that we see within our industry is overwhelming. And anyone who's super passionate at what they love, it becomes infuriating. And at times, that's when you give the direct answers, and you don't fucking put the little sugar on top to make it sound good. You just tell somebody straight up, that's bullshit, or, this is how it should be done. And for that, I admire the directiveness to really, one, educate, and two, don't sugarcoat anything. I like that, because I'm kind of the same type of personality where I'm not a bullshitter. I don't like bullshitting people. I like being straight up, and that's always going to be written on my face.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if you tell the truth, if you tell sort of it doesn't have to be the simple truth, but if you tell the truth, then there doesn't have to be any there don't have to be any ketchup or sugar or salt or pepper or anything else. Some people use the word brutal honesty, and there's no such thing. There's no such thing. Honesty is honesty, and it's not sugar-coated, and it's not brutal. If it's brutal, it's because you're wrapping it up in a porcupine, for some punitive effect or whatever else. But yeah, so it's really important. I've been answering the same questions for 30 years. Right? And 30 years later, I actually know more about the answers that I'm giving, but some of the questions are the same. And it could be, sometimes you have to stop, drop and roll, or stop and count to 10, or do something, because this is like my 45,000th time for this question, but this is this guy's first time.
Right.
This is this guy's first time. So it's really important to separate just not knowing something from defending not knowing something, right? Not knowing something is fine. And people aren't stupid because they don't know. People aren't stupid. People aren't stupid because they don't know. And people in general are not really stupid. Everybody has a thing, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody has it. I was thinking about this while I was making a pizza earlier. Everybody's got a thing. And it used to be that we could, without a whole lot of study, So you were talking about the 80s and how much easier car audio was in the 80s and 90s. Matt, I was you in the 80s and 90s. I'm older than you. And so I was a fabricator, but we did fabrication differently, right? In the 80s, we didn't have CNC machines and all that. So we had files and coping saws, right? So the job of a fabricator 30 years ago was a lot of sanding, right? So maybe there's still some sanding, but not the volume of sanding that we used to do. But this is a really good example because in the 80s and 90s, I bought in 1988, 88, yeah, 88, and I had been installing for a couple of years. I bought an 88 Honda CRX. And this was the year it was like the Motor Trend Car of the Year. When I look back on that and on how simple that car was, and I think, how is something like that the Motor Trend Car of the Year ever in any universe, right? But that was a long time ago. I bought my car Radio Delete. And when you bought a car Radio Delete in 1988, Hondas came with the antenna. There were some other cars that didn't even get the antenna. And there wasn't even a hole in the fender for the antenna if you got Radio Delete. Right? So you're right. I mean, we would slap a DIN radio in and we would run RCA cables to an amp in the back. Actually, if it was a bigger system, there were no crossovers built into amps or any of that kind of stuff. So everything was in a separate box. There was a crossover box. There was an EQ box. There was an amp box. The amps were 2 channels. So if you had a 3-way in the front and a sub, that was 4 amps, right? And they were big. They were big because they were all class AB. But they weren't 300 watts class AB. We used a 22.5 watt per channel little thing called the Punch 45 on a pair of tweeters. And this is one of the reasons that we didn't blow stuff up quite like we do today. Anyway, so things were simpler. And if you go back 100 years, they were even simpler than that, right? So I think I wasn't alive 100 years ago, but I think that probably access to information was much more difficult than access to information is now. But I think that if you're living in like a little wooden house that you ordered from Sears, Roebuck and Company, there's one store and it's like 4 blocks away and you have to walk there because there are no cars. And every night you eat a chicken and a couple of carrots and a stick of celery and you finish reading a book and then you go to bed, that you don't have to know a whole lot, right? You don't have to know a whole lot to get through your life, right? And you probably have some kind of a job, right? You probably have some kind of a job. There were no software engineers. There were no coders, right? There were blacksmiths and farriers and, all that kind of stuff. These were a lot of trades. There were some professional things. There were lawyers and there were politicians and whatever else. And you could go to college, and if you went to college and you became a professional, that was why you went to college, was to become a professional. Because if you didn't want to be a professional, if you were going to be a tradesperson, which is a blacksmith or a whatever, this was no problem, right? But you didn't need to go to college to do that. You went to work for a blacksmith, and over 7 or 8 years as an apprentice or whatever, then you became this really good blacksmith. And that's what you did. But now, shit's really complicated. Shit's really complicated. And there's no way to get through life in the same way, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're living in this little craftsman house that you bought from Sears and you're eating a carrot, when do you need to rely on expertise, right? When do you need to rely on expertise?
When you have a health issue.
Yes, when you go to the doctor, and maybe 100 years ago, you'd go to the doctor and the guy would stick a leech on your forehead, and that was all the science they knew, right? So that was cutting edge, man. Hey, we're gonna stick this fucking leech on your head, and it's gonna suck all these toxins out, and you're gonna be fine, right? That was the best science that was the best science there was, and there wasn't better science. And that dude probably made that shit up. Or he went to college and somebody who made that shit up told him that shit.
There's nobody there to call him on their bullshit because of the education.
Well, right.
Which is where we're at today.
Well, but wait. So now it's really complicated. And in order to make it through life, you got to know something. You got to be able to do something. and other people have to be able to rely on you to do something. So some jobs, let's call those body jobs, right? These are jobs, these are labor jobs. These are where you lift shit and move shit and push on shit and bang on shit and whatever else, right? We still have those jobs, and you can do one of those jobs, and you can make a damn good living doing one of those jobs, because there are a lot of people who aren't big enough to bang on shit and move shit and push shit and whatever else. And then there are other jobs where you make things, and you're an artisan, or you're a craftsman, or you're whatever. These jobs are jobs that you do, that you learn to do, but they take expertise. They take expertise, right? And a lot of us who are in car audio do that, right? We make stuff, and we learn to make stuff over a long time. Sometimes somebody taught us how to do something. Gary Biggs taught me how to do a whole bunch of installation stuff when I was like underwater, and I would call him and I'm like, Gary, I gotta finish this, and he'd tell me, oh no, you're doing it the long way, right? He would like simplify it for me. Just do this. So Gary has a very specific expertise, right? Gary's a super great problem solver and troubleshooter when it comes to making things, right? Gary, in his mind, sees this complicated thing, and all of a sudden, a really simple process for doing this thing appears to him, right? And it appears to him because this is what he does. It appears to him because this is what he does. So I do a thing, and I've spent 35 years in audio, listening when people who are much smarter than me were talking. And I was fortunate to work in a place where there were a lot of those people who were talking and writing a lot, so I didn't have to talk a lot, right? I got to read and listen a lot, and then there came a point at which I was the one who was, doing some of the talking. But over the course of some period of time, we all develop expertise. Everybody develops some expertise. Whether you're a car stereo, whether you're a car audio tech, or an engineer, or a marketer, or a thief, you develop some expertise, because expertise is now what's required to make it through. And what we have is a world that's so complicated that each of us has some very specific expertise that allows us to make a living and get a thing done and be helpful and supportive of other people and make a living, because this is how we make a living. But everything is so complicated that in order to get anything done, we have to rely on the expertise of other people. And I think that we're not now doing a very good job of relying on the expertise of other people. And when we don't understand something, we like to reduce it. We reduce it to something else, something that we can understand, right? This is sort of the conspiracy theory thing, but on a smaller scale, we like to have simple answers. We want somebody to boil things down for us. And unfortunately, what happens when we want people to boil things down for us, we allow them to boil things down so far that they're no longer true or useful, because we don't have the time or energy to devote to an acceptable understanding of this thing, right? So that a complicated world coupled with mistrustfulness makes a world that's ripe for opportunists to tell big fat lies and to take our money, because that's another expertise, right? Getting people to give you their money. So it's really important to separate stupidity from just not knowing something. Somebody's not stupid because they ask me a question that seems obvious. They're stupid if they ask me a question that doesn't seem obvious to them, and then they argue from a point of knowing absolutely nothing with the answer. This is stupid. This is stupid.
What are the things you hear most often that out of what you preach, which I would say that the outside looking in, Andy has an amazing tuning guide. He's helped a lot of people make their systems sound better and do better. He does catch a lot of slack online from people that seem to think they have a better way. And I know that you end up having to jump in where people have started down a path of following what you've laid out very eloquently for them. and they get stuck along the way and you have to try to save them, or they get upset with you. What parts of your process, or what questions do you get that are frustrating that you could use this to kind of explain better to people or help them have a better understanding of that?
Okay, so I'm going to be a politician here, and I'm going to not directly answer your question, but I'm going to answer it in another way. So the worst thing, the biggest misunderstanding, the worst thing that people think about car audio, the dumbest thing, and the thing that is repeated over and over and over and over, and every time I hear it, it's annoying, and it costs customers time, and it costs people money, and it causes a lot of disappointment, is the idea that too little power blows speakers. This
Okay.
is fucking stupid. This is stupid. There is one sort of sliver of a case in which this is true. But it's a semantic mistake to call it this, right? And that is when you have an amplifier that doesn't make enough power for the listener, and he attempts to get the amplifier to play louder than it can without sounding terrible, right? Because when he turns it up farther and he clips the amp, this adds a whole bunch of power, and it adds all that power at high frequencies, and that burns up tweeters. But you cannot blow a speaker with too little power. Never. You can't do it. You cannot blow a speaker with too little power.
And the long explanation becomes that it is power over time, right? And so when you when you drive something to clipping, you're holding extreme amounts of power for a longer period of time, and that's what blows it. But the power is the power of the amplifier is irrelevant. It's the fact that you're driving it to mad clipping, and you either have a speaker that's not efficient enough, or not mated well to an amplifier, or an installation that speakers, you put a speaker further away, or too small of a speaker. Matt, we talked about that one car where I had a customer bring in a car. They hated the way it sounded, and it had a high output Pro Audio style 8-inch mid bass in the door that was like 98 or 99 dB at 1 watt. And for the high end, Andy, they had a 2-inch driver that was 81 dB at 1 watt, and they couldn't understand why their system sounded terrible.
So what's even the argument that you hear from people saying that too little power essentially blows speakers?
Well, so what they want to do is drive a speaker that's rated to handle 100 watts. They want to drive it with 300 watts because headroom. They want to drive it with 300 watts because headroom. So there is a sort of a thing, right? And that is that music is made up of periods of quiet and periods of loud. And typically the periods of loud are short and the periods of relative quiet are long. So in digital audio, which is everything is digital now, basically. I mean, there are still people who swear by records, and nobody swears by tapes anymore, but people think vinyl is great. But in digital audio, nothing can be louder than zero. Everything is less loud than zero. And when you mix a track at the end, there are a couple of things you can do. One is that you raise the level so that the highest peak in the track hits zero, and that's it. That's what you get. And at the beginning of digital, this is how recordings were. If you listen to an old Van Morrison, Too Long in Exile is a really good album for this. The crest factor is unbelievable, but the average level is really low. So that's what they would do. They would, at the end of mixing the track, they would make the highest peak zero, and they would leave everything else alone. And then with digital audio workstations, now we can do all kinds of crazy shit. And it became the loudness war. And the loudness war is basically reducing the crest factor of the music, which means we don't make anything have a peak that's higher than 0, but we raise the average level. We raise the average level so that the difference between the peak and the average level of the song, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So this is called dynamic range compression, and it's useful. It's useful for a couple of things. When you're making a track and you have like a vocalist, and you want that vocalist to be prominent in the recording, or if you're recording, or if you're mixing for what you think are going to be little audio devices, and somebody's going to put this little beer can speaker in their backyard, and they want to be able to hear Lady Gaga sing while they run the lawnmower, then you smash the hell out of Lady Gaga so that when she sings, she's as close to 0 as it can possibly be. So dynamic range compression can be really useful when used appropriately. It really ought to be in the playback device than in the recording. So the difference between this average level and peak in the music is really what power handling ratings for speakers ought to be, right? There's no RMS power. When we say RMS power, what that means is that we've calibrated an amplifier when we're testing the speaker to a particular RMS voltage, and when we square that and divide it by the nominal load of the impedance, that gives us this amount of power. The actual rating is continuous average, which correlates to the average level in a piece of music, and peak is the difference between that and 0, right? So technically, we could have a speaker. The speaker's continuous average rating would be for that average power, in the music, and that peaks in the music that were much greater, 12 dB louder, that happened for a really short period of time wouldn't blow the speaker. But as the average level of recordings approaches peak, now we have a big problem because average and peak are the same, right? So where this came from is that people wanted to have an amplifier that was big enough that it would reproduce the peaks in the music without any distortion, right? And that's fine, so long as the average level of the music doesn't exceed the continuous average, or what we now call RMS rating of the speaker. And that would work fine. That would require that when we set the gain for that amplifier, which would have, so if we have a speaker that handles 100 watts, we'd use a 300 watt amplifier. And if we set the gain of the amplifier using a 0 dB test track, then the amplifier would never clip, and the music, the average level of the music, if it was 6 dB lower than that 300 watts, 6 dB would be a quarter of the power, so we have 75 watts continuous average, and our 100 watt speaker would be perfectly fine, perfectly happy, whatever, right? But if we set the gains on our high frequency amplifiers with a minus 10 dB sine wave track, because we want to make sure that some recordings that are not very loud can sound louder. Basically, we're doing dynamic range compression in the amplifier. Now we've completely eliminated this ability of the amplifier to regulate all this stuff, because 10 dB is 10 times. We haven't limited the amplifier at all. We've told our 300 watt amplifier, dude, if you want to make 3,000 watts, you go ahead and try. Right? So when we clip an audio signal, so the power over time thing is kind of right, but the square wave looks to us when we look at it like, oh, it's a lot of power for a long time, right? And I've explained it this way years ago, because this is how I began to understand it. So we look at the sine wave or the square wave and we say, holy shit, it's like at max power the whole time. It's at max power the whole time. But what makes the square wave square is higher frequencies, right? When we begin to clip a signal, like let's say we have a 100 hertz sine wave and we turn the volume up until it starts to clip, right? What happens when the waveform starts to clip is that another harmonic appears in the signal, 200 hertz, and then 300 hertz, and 400 hertz, and 500 hertz, and 600 hertz, and 700 hertz. And as we continue to turn it up, the level of those harmonics gets higher, and that's what squares the wave, right? So it's really difficult to blow up a subwoofer with a really inductive coil with an amplifier that's clipped, because the subwoofer's coil gets rid of some of that high frequency, which is what makes the clipped waveform. And if the subwoofer amp is a Class D amp, it has a passive low pass filter on the output, and that eliminates a bunch of the clipping. But high frequency speakers, forget it. High frequency speakers, forget it. People see a tweeter that's rated 100 watts, and they think that they need to apply 300 watts to the tweeter so that they have headroom. What they don't realize is that we use pink noise because it looks kind of like the power distribution in music. So pink noise is white noise. White noise is equal energy at every frequency. That's run through a pink filter, and a pink filter is the 3 dB per octave low pass filter, right? So if we have 100 watts, so in pink noise, 20K is 30 dB below 20 hertz. 30 dB below 20 hertz. 30 dB is 1,000th of the power. So we have 100 watts at 20 hertz, and we're driving the full bandwidth signal through the same amplifier. At 20K, we have 1/10 of a watt. At 20K, we have 1/10 of a watt. At 10K, we have 2/10 of a watt. At 5K, at 20K, we have 1/10 of a watt. At 10K, we have 2/10 of a watt. At 5K, we have 4/10 of a watt. At 2.5K, we have 8/10 of a watt. And that's how much power your 100-watt tweeter will handle.
That's a lot to process.
It's not. I mean, it is. But so my whole point about this idea of relying on other people's expertise is that we, in order to enjoy a car stereo system, we don't have to know all of that, right? We can call Andy, or we can call any number of people who are a shitload smarter than Andy and ask them to explain all of this, and then we can go, fuck, bro, head explode, bro, dude, fuck, or we can just go, oh, and then not turn it on.
How come 10 watts on a tweeter doesn't make it loud enough then?
What do you mean?
I'm saying if you put a 10 watt amplifier on a tweeter.
Oh, you'd be shocked. Oh, that's all your amp is giving it anyway. Not even 10 watts. Your 300 watt amp, when you play music through it, is sending a watt to your tweeter. You don't need a 300 watt amp. You can use a 1 watt amp, and it'll be just fine. Remember, Gary, when we were using punch 45s on tweeters?
Yeah, but we were also, they were putting out more than 20 watts a channel, I think. But you
no, they weren't. They were putting out 1 fucking watt. Well, it's the same goddamn tweeter. It's the same goddamn tweeter. They're putting out a watt because that's how music works. They're putting out a watt because that's how music works. So we use 22 watt amplifiers on tweeters, and we still burned up some tweeters. I mean, Rockford made tweeters so that we could replace the dome. Big ferrite magnet, and you could unscrew the dome and put another dome on there. Even the little hard dome tweeters, you could open those things up and it was like a twist lock thing, and you could remove the dome and you could put another one on. And a new dome was just 30 years ago. A new dome was like $12. But we still burned up tweeters, and we burned up tweeters with 22 watt amplifiers. We didn't burn up tweeters like we do now. We didn't burn up mid ranges like we do now. But we were driving Sherwin Vega LE12s with punch 150s, and there was so much bass you couldn't even stay in the car. And now we've got 18-inch woofers and 6,000 watts, and you can't stay in the car. So what was the difference? What was the difference?
That's a good question.
Efficiency. Efficiency was the difference.
The woofers were more efficient than today's woofers. That's by far, yes.
Yeah, but when you think about power and you think about exponents, right? 3 dB is double the power. So we go from 150 watts to 300 watts. We get 3 dB, double the power. How much louder is 3 dB? A little bit. It's a little bit louder. 3 dB is a little bit louder. 6 dB? Yeah, it's louder. 9 dB? That's a pretty nice amp. 12 dB? Wow. That system plays a lot louder than mine. 12 dB is 16 times the power. 16 times the power. So speakers are massively inefficient. like at 88 or so dB at a watt and a meter, about 1% of the power that goes into the speaker actually makes music or makes movement or makes music, makes sound. The other 99% makes heat. Right? So what happens when we go from 150 watts to 16,000 watts? What do we have to do? Because most of that power is actually turns into heat in the speaker. We got to add massive ass voice coils that weigh a shit ton. And what happens to our efficiency now?
Keeps going down.
Right. It's like yeah, my V16, my 30 liter V16 sure has a lot of power, but it gets like 0.02 miles per gallon. So we got to pull a big ass fucking trailer full of gas, right? So it doesn't go any faster, right? It doesn't go any faster. We just spend a lot more money. We make a lot of heat. Man, that's so loud you can't even sit in the car. So the dumbest thing ever is this notion that we need to drive speakers with 3 times the amount of power because we don't want to blow them up. Oh, I didn't want to blow them up. Oh, I don't want to blow them up. How much power did you... Man, this thing, the voice coils melted. How much power did you use? Oh, we bridged a 250 watt per channel amp on that thing. Well, but it's rated to handle 100 watts continuous, 100 watts arm. Oh, I didn't want to blow it. I mean, imagine how stupid this is. So when was the last time somebody who was in your car, when was the last time that somebody knowledgeable about car audio was in your car and you had the volume down because you were talking? And the dude looked over at you and said, dude, you ought to just like turn that thing off while we're talking because you don't want to blow your speakers.
Yeah, that's an argument that I don't even get. I can't even fathom.
I don't think that's much. Well, I mean, I guess there are people that still contend that. I think that there's
every day I get this every day. I answer this question every single day. Every single day.
So it sounds like that's the equivalent of the same question I always get on YouTube, where people claim that when I install, an amp or two in a Tesla, that somehow that's going to diminish 100 miles of range on the car.
This is exactly the same thing.
It is so fucking frustrating.
Well, so it's super frustrating, and it's exactly the same thing. So they think that they've got like you got an amp in there. You got a 300 watt amp for the tweeters, and you got a 300 watt amp for the mids, and you got a 300 watt amp for the mid bass, and you got a 1,000 watt amp for the subwoofer, right? The only amp that's ever going to make 1,000 watts in that system is the sub. The only one.
Correct. Yep.
Because even so 20 hertz, 1,000 watts. 40 hertz, how many watts? 500.
I didn't follow you. Let's start that over one more time.
If we're thinking about pink noise as being somewhat representative of music, you got 1,000 watts at 20 hertz out of your 1,000 watt amp, right? That's the only frequency that will ever drive one of your amps to 1,000 watts. If you set the gains at 0, right? If you set the gains with a 0 dB sine wave, right? 20 hertz will make 1,000 watts out of your 1,000 watt subwoofer amp. At 40 hertz, it'll be 500 watts, 3 dB per octave. At 40 hertz, it's 500 watts. At 80 hertz, it's 250 watts.
250, yeah.
250.
Yep.
That's when the volume is all the way up. That's when the volume is all the way up. Right? So when the volume is halfway up, how much power is the system using?
Do you have a chart? Have you ever charted that out and put it like a visual representation of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you go to audiofrog.com and click on Tech Blog at the top, there's a blog entry called Pink Noise, White Noise, and Why Your Tweeters Never Get 150 Watts. And so probably the chart that you're after is not exactly what's in there, but yeah, there's a visual representation of this and a pretty good explanation. So that's the worst one. That's the worst one is this nebulous idea that power handling is this. So the other one that's related to that is that power handling is somehow a power requirement, right? People look at this is a beginner sort of thing.
I hate that one. Yeah.
I mean,
from
I think
a client standpoint, a lot of the times when you're trying to pair different gear with gear, and then they do their own research and say, well, this is this and this is this. Why?
That's a 100 watt speaker. It needs 100 watts.
Yeah.
a 100-watt speaker needs 100 watts. Well,
Yeah, I have to talk about that one all the time to clients.
right. Yes, the speed limit doesn't mean that you drive that fast all the time. I mean, for most of us, the speed limit is so low now, it means that we drive higher, faster than that. But limits are typically an indication of where not to go, right? Instead of an indication of where to go all the time. So yeah, the notion that a speaker rated to handle 100 watts needs 100 watts. No, a customer might need 100 watts. And if a customer needs 300 watts, then we need to get him into a couple of speakers, or we need to get him into speakers that will handle that much power. So the speakers don't have a minimum amount of power that they need, but customers do. Customers do. And it's our job as a salesperson to the world is complicated. The world is complicated, right? As car audio dudes, it's our responsibility to help that guy because he knows how to fix your dog, right? He knows how to fix you. He knows everything about fixing your fucking dog, but he doesn't know shit about a car stereo, but he wants one, and he just wants to enjoy one. He doesn't want an education. We don't need to educate the customer. We just need to satisfy the customer. I don't want to know how to fix my dog. Right? I mean, if it's something simple, if it's like, hey, give him a couple of these pills every night before he goes to bed, and that'll fix him in like 3 weeks. That I can do, right? That I can do. But if my dog needs a surgery, I don't want to learn that. I don't rely on the dude. I want to rely on the dog dude to do that. So we're the stereo dudes. So our job is to provide the benefit of our expertise to someone who has some other expertise.
So, I mean, I'm going to disagree with your sentiment that you don't need to physically educate the client. Like how I've always done the sales process is educating the client, first understanding their expectations, and then educating them, much like we do on this podcast. This is the whole reason we made the podcast, so I don't have to repeat myself. If people call and say, hey, I listen to your podcast, bam, I already know I don't got to go through a ton of education for that particular client. Because if a client wants something, wants their car to sound better, you need to educate them to a certain aspect of what's going to make your car sound better and why they can't just throw speakers in it. Why is a 3-way better than a 2-way? Why do they need, X, Y, and Z, right? So we always go through a very education guideline so they can make an educated decision on how much money they need to spend. Because, if you're going to just show me 2 different vacuums on Amazon, us as a world culture in today's day and age is we're going to overeducate ourselves to try and figure out what's the best fucking vacuum to purchase, right? So we don't regret our purchase in the end. We're all going to look at tons of reviews and get the best self-education we have, therefore, to make the best decision. And that's where a lot of the salespeople in today's day and age fail in car audio, because people are coming in with a more broad education. They've done a little bit of research before they walk in, and all of a sudden they know more answers than the fucking salesman. So they instantly lose trust.
Matt, I think the difference there, though, is that if you walked into a store and there were 2 vacuums and some shit on the floor, and you grabbed the first one and it picked the stuff up the way you expected it to, and you grabbed the second one and it didn't pick it up the way you were hoping it would, you would buy the one, regardless of the price, whatever it was, you'd want the one that picked up the stuff the way you thought it would pick up. I think that's Andy's point, is like, to satisfy the customer just wants to be satisfied. They don't necessarily need to know every detail to make those decisions along the way.
We have to explain things to customers when they require it to help them feel like they've mitigated risk.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Right? So customers buy from us when they're comfortable. And the faster we can make them comfortable, the quicker they'll take our recommendation. Right? So the vacuum cleaner is a really good example, because I just bought a vacuum cleaner.
How much time did you spend researching vacuum cleaners before you bought one?
Not very much. But I spent a lot of time using ones that I didn't like. And I used a lot of, I'm 55, man. I've had more vacuum cleaners than I've had cars, and I've had a lot of cars.
You had the official Electrolux back in the day.
My mom had the official Electrolux, the canister back that you pull around with the hose and whatever.
It probably still works too.
Right. So when I moved out of the house and I moved into my own apartment, it's like, fuck, man, I need all this shit. Right? I need a whole bunch of shit. I mean, my dad doesn't have an extra vacuum cleaner, so I got to buy a vacuum cleaner, right? I don't know anything about vacuum cleaners, so what do I do as a 20-year-old getting his first apartment and realizing that he didn't buy a vacuum cleaner? Now he's got to go buy a vacuum. I bought a cheap ass vacuum cleaner. What do I know, right? What do I know? I buy a Dirt Devil. There's a reason this is called the Dirt Devil. It don't work. Right? And I'd vacuum for 45 minutes and there's still dirt on the floor. But it never occurred to me that there was any difference between vacuum cleaners. Right? There's some that are really expensive. The Electrolux. Who would pay $1,400 for a goddamn vacuum cleaner, right? I want a Dirt Devil. That thing's not going to work 10 times better than this thing that I literally vacuum 4 square feet for 45 minutes and it's still not clean, right? So I had a lot of vacuum cleaners. When Lisa and I bought a vacuum cleaner, we bought a Dyson, right? And Lisa is like, just buy the best one. Just get the best one. Whatever. Just get the best one. So we buy a Dyson, and holy shit, man, this thing is great. Right? Yeah, the Dyson is the Dyson is great. So the Dyson is fine, and we have the Dyson for a really long time. And I rent a shop. I rent a warehouse, and in the warehouse, I have a warehouse downstairs. And this is one of those industrial things, and it's in like Sun Valley. And when people come to LA, they don't go, nobody goes to Sun Valley. You go to Sun Valley when you're looking for bricks, right? Or like a big ass rock to put in your yard. That's what you go to Sun Valley for. The other reason you go to Sun Valley is to rent a kind of an industrial kind of a warehouse at a reasonable price. And at the time, I didn't have people in, right? Nobody comes to visit the manufacturer, especially not a little manufacturer like me. So I needed space. I needed a warehouse, and I needed like an office, and then I needed another space for me to make stuff and do all kinds of stuff. So I rent this cheap place in Sun Valley, but it has carpet, right? Sun Valley is dusty and dirty and shit, and I needed to be able to vacuum the carpet. I'm like, I'm not buying a $500 Dyson to vacuum the carpet at work. So along comes Shark, right? Shark, the Euro Pro, right? Which is we'll take somebody's cool thing and like knock it off and kind of make it better and whatever else. So I buy a Shark and I'm like, wow, this Shark is pretty good. So I move out of there and we move into a house and I have this Shark and I bring it home because now I'm in a spot where I don't have carpet. So I bring the Shark home. The Dyson finally dies. I bring the Shark home and it's like, man, we don't have carpet, but now we have this like vinyl that looks like wood and it's like you can like melt gold on this and nothing will ever happen to it. But the Shark doesn't clean this. And I'm back to like the Dirt Devil. I'm like vacuuming the kitchen for 45 minutes. There's still flour on the floor. So I'm like, okay, I gotta get a vacuum. So I go online, right? I type in best vacuum for bare floors, best vacuum for bare floors. So what pops up? The first 4,000 Google entries are what? All of those Amazon troll, best list Mumbai, whatever. There are those for car audio. So I read those. And I'm like, wait a minute, this guy's shilling for Amazon because every one of the purchase links is for Amazon. I'm like, what am I going to do? So I keep scrolling. I find the New York Times review of bare floor vacuums. And they say, Miele, or however you pronounce this, is hands down the best vacuum for bare floors. There's no better vacuum for bare floors than this thing. And I'm like, well, so it's the New York Times, right? So that's probably pretty good. So then I go from there to reading reviews of this particular Miele vacuum cleaner. And like everybody who's ever owned one says, dude, don't even bother, man, right? So I don't know why this Miele vacuum is better. And I didn't go to vacuum cleaner engineering school, and I didn't call somebody and say, dude, tell me about the motor, man. Tell me about the motor.
No, but you're proving my point right now.
No, I'm going to get there.
Listen. You've already done the page and you've weeded out the nonsense. And if you had walked into a vacuum store and some guy knew what the fuck he was talking about, and he said, you don't want this bullshit because of X, Y, and Z. You don't want this because of this and this. And he sounded like clearly this guy knows way more than my independent research. And I feel at ease instantly with this guy. You're doing business, and you're going to do exactly what he says.
Yeah, of course, but that's not an education. That's comfort. That's building it. That's trusting.
But he's
somebody.
educating you of why the other ones suck and why you should buy
No,
whatever
I
it
didn't.
is that
Matt, I did not get an education about why the other one sucked. I recognized that the other one sucked. I got confirmation that the other one sucked. And then I got confirmation that this thing that somebody recommended was actually great. So I did a bunch of research. Not a lot. I mean, this was like a 20-minute exercise. I did a bunch of research, but I did not do a bunch of research into the nuts and bolts of all of this stuff. I found one that everybody said, dude, you can't go wrong. And I bought it, right?
But Andy, this is my point. This is my
No.
point.
Okay, then I
Listen,
misunderstood.
hold on.
Wait, you're making a point about education. You're making a point about education. So if education means teaching somebody about a crossover, I completely disagree with you. If education means explaining what a DSP does, I completely disagree with you.
Here, this is my point exactly, okay? So say you looked on the Amazon links and that was the one you ended up choosing, right? And you went somewhere local to buy it. And the person where you went local to buy it, he was a specialist. He was a professional in that particular thing, vacuums, right? And your research told him that you can make your 2021 car sound better with just these plug-and-play speakers and nothing else, whatever it may be, right? It's our job to educate to that person why that's not true. That's my point that I was getting at. Maybe you misunderstood that, but that's the point that I'm getting at, is taking that person who has dived in as much as you did with your vacuum cleaner, and they're coming to your store because a lot of times they need somebody to install it. A vacuum cleaner you can just purchase on Amazon, so they have to go somewhere, and we're the people being like, listen, this is ridiculous. Your bazooka fucking subwoofer is going to sound like shit in your new car if you're just trying to connect it to the speakers, right? This is where the education process comes into play.
I see that as every forum, every vehicle-specific forum where you go on and some dude's like, yeah, I got this brand new 2020 whatever, and I went to the Best Buy, and I got a pair of, I'll be politically correct here, brand XYZ coaxes and threw them in the dash, and oh my gosh, it night
sounds
and day
awesome.
better.
Yeah,
it's
then
way louder.
Everyone wants that.
All the detail that was missing is there, and blah,
because
blah, blah.
That's what we get
$49.
Yeah. That's what we get as an industry. So it's our job to educate that person on why that's absolute bullshit. The same education you're giving to fucking installers and enthusiasts about why what they believe is bullshit, because you're educating them. It's the same concept.
Right.
And you can't argue that point. You're going to try, but you can't argue that point.
So I agree with you. But the guy who reads for 16 hours a day in the goddamn forums is somebody who wants an education.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we're talking about the guy who comes in with this laundry list of all this bullshit that he's read, and it's all bullshit, we have to, of course we have to uneducate that guy. But when the dog doctor comes in and says, man, fuck, I just bought this new Lexus and I hate the way it sounds. Those kinds of customers, they need to know that we know what we're talking about. And at the point at which we have confirmed for them that we know what we're talking about, they're like, here's my wallet, man. Here's my wallet. So I agree with you about the enthusiast. If we're talking to enthusiasts, and probably, Matt, because of what you do and the way you do it, you're talking to a lot more of these enthusiasts than other shops, because you're doing like totally over the top work.
Yeah, but I still see stuff within like the sound effects side where somebody comes in with a fucking bazooka tube, right? That their grandma gave them for their birthday or some shit like that. And there needs to be a conversation in which you're going to give that person some sort of an education to lead them to something that's going to make them have what they're looking for and done correctly.
What do you have against bazooka tubes, Matt? I mean,
I don't know. Geez. That's just the easy
one.
Man,
I installed a shitload of bazooka tubes. They made a lot of bass. But if somebody brought in a 30-year-old bazooka tube, I'd be like, dude, man, this thing's 30 years old. Right?
But I guess, Andy, so like my question to you is, put yourselves in a car audio salesman shoes, right? You have a client that comes in with let's just call it a
you mean my shoes? Put myself in my shoes? Because that's what I am. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So put yourself in a car audio salesman on the sales floor, and you have a customer that comes in with just say a 2020 Lexus GS 350 and they don't like the way their car sounds, right? How are you leading off that sales conversation? What are you asking that client?
Well, so this is a part of
because this is going to be the normal type of, I think, questions that a lot
no
of car
different.
audio dealerships would have.
So besides the complexity that exists in the car, which is our responsibility and not the customer's responsibility,
right?
This is no different than customer walks in 88 Buick Century and says, I need a new system. I need a system in this car because this thing sucks, right? This thing sucks. So the difference between the 88 Century and now is that we know why the 88 Century sucked, right? We know it sucked because it had 4x6s in the front and 6x9s in the back, and it had a 5-watt radio and a cassette deck, and it sucked for all those reasons, right? Now, what we're forced to do because of the complexity of the automobile is start from a different place, right? We can't say, oh, bro, I know why it sucks, right? It sucks because the gear that's in there is shit, and it's these assholes that made these speakers don't know anything about car audio. This is nothing. Nobody was serious about this. There was no passion. There was no passion in a factory system in an 88 fucking Buick Century, right? No passion whatsoever. You can't say that now because the car's got 32 speakers and 4 PhDs built the system, right? So there are plenty of car stereo sales guys who start with, it sucks, man. The gear that's in there is fucking shit, bro. And there's no fucking passion. Because they've been saying the same thing for 20 years. And it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work anymore because the pitch in, it's all shit, is we're going to fucking remove all of it. We're going to replace all of it. And now, if you tell the customer that the system in his 2021 Lexus is shit and you got to remove all of it, you're fucked. Right? Because you can't remove all of it. So you have to start in a different spot. So my suggestion, and this is one of the things that we talk about a lot when I used to do AudioFrog U before the scamdemic, is we have to make an assessment of a couple of things. One of those things is, what can we do? Because we are constrained now, right? In an 88 Buick Century, there were no constraints. There were constraints, right? The dash speaker location was a 4x6, and that was it. And if we wanted a bigger speaker in the front, we had to get out a hole saw or some other plasma fucking cutter or something, or build a big spacer on the door because the window was like 3/4 of an inch behind the panel, like in an El Camino or a Chevy truck. So now we're constrained. So the first thing that we have to do is understand what we can do and what we cannot do.
Correct.
And we have to sell what we can do, which means that we have to be a salesperson. So now that we have constraints, now that we know what our constraints are, we have to get a better understanding of how our customers' desires fit in those constraints. So the next thing we need to know is, what does the customer like? What can we keep? And what do we have to get rid of? What do we have to improve? So years ago, what we did when we improved car stereo systems is we made the front sound better and we added a sub. We made the front sound better and we added a sub. Made the front sound better and added a sub. This is still what we do. This is still what we do. We do some other stuff too, but essentially we're making the front sound better and we're adding more bass because the OEM supplier cannot get the green light for a 40-pound box and a fucking amp that draws 60 amps worth of current, right? So this is so the bass is still our in, right? Because the factory is not providing enough bass for some of our customers, and for some of them, for some of them they are. So we need to go out to the car with the customer. We need to go out to the car with the customer, and we need to listen to the car with the customer. And we need to find out what does the customer not like? Why did you come here? Hey man, this thing sounds pretty good. Why did you come here? Right? So our job as a salesperson is really to make the customer comfortable enough so that he'll start talking. Because if we don't let him talk, then basically we have a really long process of asking multiple choice questions. We may never ask the right question. We may never ask the right question. We often speak a different language than the customer. I have lots of stories about customers who asked for one thing and we listened to the word and didn't understand what he means. But customers don't speak audio. The enthusiast guy speaks audio, sort of. He didn't understand any of it, but he uses all those words. But the dog doctor, he didn't speak audio. So we have to go out to the car. We have to get him talking, and we need to ask him a lot of questions to get him talking. And a sale is kind of like a date. A sale is kind of like a date. Dates go really well when you're interested, or when you at least feign interest in the person who's across the table from you. Right? It works the same way with customers, right? If we can get customers talking, we can make them feel comfortable enough to tell us their story, then we'll know exactly what to do. So we go out, we ask, we turn on the stereo. And we do things to get them to talk. One of the things that I used to do all the time is I would go out with the customer, and him sitting in the driver's seat, me sitting in the passenger seat, I would turn up the volume most of the way. I would turn the volume up most of the way because I'm trying to find out how loud does this guy listen? Because when I ask him, he's not going to tell me. Right? When customers blow shit up, what's the first thing they say? Bro, I didn't even turn it up. Right? So if you go out to if you ask the customer, hey man, how loud do you listen? He's gonna say, oh no, I don't listen loud, because listening loud means expensive.
Yeah, that's also an answer. Like when you ask people what type of music they listen to, there's always some sort of embarrassment attached with that, right? Because they don't want, right? They never want to tell you. They never want to tell you that, or the loudness of which they listen to it, because they don't want to seem like, they're abusing something, or again, they listen to something that's fucking weird.
Right. So you go out to the car and you turn the volume up like 3/4 of the way or louder. If the dude never listens that loud, he'll go, fuck man, why you turning it up so loud? And he'll slap your hand away from the dash and turn the thing down, right? If you get all the way up and the dude's like rocking out, now you know. So if you turn on so he pulled up listening to something. If you take your disc or your USB or your phone or whatever it is now out there and you play your favorite song, you've ruined your ability to get information. So the first thing you do is you go out and you take him with you and you turn on his stereo. Whatever he was driving to the stereo store. He is driving to the stereo store. He's listening to something while he's driving to the stereo store. When he's driving to the stereo store, he's probably not listening to NPR. Unless his system sounds so bad that he can't even stand to listen to it. And if you turn on the stereo and you find NPR, then you say, dude, why are you in a stereo store, man? You listen to NPR. And
unless it's NPR Tiny Desk. Which then
right, if it's NPR Tiny Desk. But so the point is that we need to be investigators and we need to be translators. So we need to go out to the car knowing how we're constrained to find out what this customer wants us to do so that we can say, yeah, we can do that, or dude, we can't do that. Or, yeah, we can do that. It's going to cost you $22,000. What? Why is it going to cost me $22,000? Well, because you wanted to play 165 dB, full range, blah, blah, blah. And that's really expensive because we need all this power and we need speakers that can handle it. And then he goes, dude, I'm not spending $22,000. I got like $9,000. We can do something for $9,000, right? So then we know where we're constrained. We can't remove the radio. We can't probably remove the amp. We're going to have to use the amp, right? So now we need to find out some other things. Does imaging matter to him? Did he ever even consider imaging?
It's finding the reference. And I think one of the best analogies that I use all the time, and it's such a great analogy because as a society, we know the evolution of the TV, right? We've been fucking promoted down our throat, fucking 720p, 1080p, fucking 4K, 8K, like that shit has been pushed down our throat for years, right? But all of us, especially, the enthusiast, have been an enthusiast with video as well, to some extent, right? So in the mid 90s, we all had DLP TVs and we all thought they were the fucking shit, right? We didn't think it was going to get much better than that. And if you were to lock yourself in a log cabin for the last 25 years and you never left that fucking cabin and you're still watching your DLP TV thinking it's a shit, and then you mosey on out and you see fucking a movie in 8K laser projection, your fucking head would explode. And then all of the sudden, that reference point that you loved is just immediately shattered. You go back to that cabin, your first order of business is replacing that fucking TV. Right? You know, because your reference has been just completely shaken. And I think that's the beautiful thing about us as a, you know, car audio community with people who know how to tune, is delivering just an unbelievable experience that they've never had. And for me, when I sell, I always oversell because I know the reference is not even close to what my reference would be. And some people that have a lot of money in home stereo, at the same time, they have a reference for home stereo, but at the same time, when they get into a car, subliminally, they're thinking the best car that they've ever heard. And, you know, we've talked about this on the podcast that there's so much magic fucking tricks to be made in a car because you can see the speakers. You know you're sitting next to the fucking left side speakers, and you know the subwoofer's in the back more times than not. And when you can make one overall image in the center of the car, that's fucking special. Because you can stare at the speakers in the pillar and you'd be like, I swear to God, these aren't playing. And in fact, that's one of the biggest things I notice when I give demos to the client's car when they pick it up is they'll put their hand like over the speakers because it doesn't sound like they're playing, right? So it's a fucking magic trick. And in a home or when you're in a movie theater, like, you know where to get the best seat because your eyes tell you where to go. But when you're in a car, all that changes. And when you have this image or this experience that you've never had before, and obviously you have a passion for music because that's why you're there, it creates a fucking priority now in that person's life. And I tell, you know, Brian Layton this all the time, and my salespeople, is like, everyone has that thing, much like you said, that they know or that they spend money on. Even poor people spend money on something. And for me, it's to get them to be passionate enough about audio to make this one of the most important things of their life. And proving that concept is where we get people to spend a lot of money on really nice builds. Because, again, I took my neighbor who could care less about audio, but he's always been interested in the type of shit that I show him. You know, like if we have a cookout out back, I'll show him shit that I build and tell him how much it was. And he's like, what the fuck? I would love to see what something like that is like. So, you know, I put him in one of the cars that we built and told him the price tag. And all of a sudden he's like, I get it. You know, because this is almost like a sense of therapy where, especially in today's crazy ass world, you can go to your car, you can go on your hour commute, your 2-hour commute, whatever it is. And all of a sudden you're just like in your own space. You're in your own alley. And there's nothing that is going to, you know, take you away from that because you can just totally disconnect from the world.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is why all of us, well, not all of us anymore. I think some of us do this because we like to make cool stuff. But for those of us for those of us who do audio, because some of us do audio and some of us do car accessories, some of us do primarily fabrication, kind of in support of audio, but audio is not really, you know, whatever. There are lots of guys like that. These are the guys who and I've talked to lots of them. You know, they're totally into the build, and then they want me to listen to it, and I listen to it, and it's like, it's not very good, but I'm trying to be complimentary, and they say, well, not bad for the 20 minutes I spent tuning it, right? So not everybody who does this work is into that, but those of us who love audio have that very same kind of experience, and in a lot of cases, it's a very similar kind of taste in music and in a kind of a musical performance. So I love to go to live shows, and this whole COVID thing was turned LA into like some little town in Texas, because there were no live shows. And as soon as they started selling, the Hollywood Bowl opened up, and I'm like, okay, I gotta buy a bunch of tickets. I spent thousands of dollars on concert tickets. This weekend we're going to see The Temptation and the Four Tops on Saturday. On Sunday we're going to see Herbie Hancock. The next Saturday we're going to see Van Morrison. 2 weeks later is Bon Iver, and then there's what's his name, Elton John at Dodger Stadium. So I love live music, and to me, a great sounding system includes some suggestion about the space in which the performance happened.
100%.
Right? So I like to go to live music. I like to go to live performances for a couple of reasons. One is because it's an event, right? It's an event. I know I'm going to hear songs that I've heard 1,000 times before interpreted in a different way. And I'm going to hear them in the midst of a whole bunch of people who have also heard them, who will be hearing them again in a different way for the first time. It's an event, and it's a social event, and whatever else. But there are people who hate that. I mean, we had a dealer for a while, and he hated it. He hated imaging. He was like, man, this is boring to me. It's all like, it's like not interesting. This kid loved to go to clubs. When I worked at Harman, twice a year, I would go to Jakarta to do trainings and all kinds of stuff. Nobody parties like people in Jakarta. Nobody parties like people in Jakarta. And we would go to this club. I don't even remember the name of this place. We would eat dinner at 10. And then we would go to another club to have a couple of like low-key drinks before going to this club. We would get to this big disco at 1 a.m. And we were some of the first people getting there because you could get like a box seat, like a room in a balcony that overlooked the dance floor, whatever else. So we would get there early at 1 a.m. to get one of these rooms. Like 25 of us, right, partying in this club. At 4 a.m, there were 6,000 people. At 4 a.m, there were 6,000 people in this club. You can't even walk around, which is why we would get these boxes so that we're not like pressed up against everybody else, and you could actually sit down. With 6,000 people, we'd leave the club at 8 a.m. and I would have to go directly to the airport. Right? There was no imaging. There was no imaging in this club. And so this dealer, this is the kind of music that he liked. And we sometimes think that kind of system is like some kind of blow-off thing. It doesn't have to image. We don't need a DSP. We don't need to do any of this work, whatever. If you've ever gone into where all of the equipment is in a club like that, there's way more amps and way more DSP and way more processing than you'll find in any live show. These are serious systems, and we sometimes forget that there are other ways in which people, in which people listen to music, and sometimes we make a mistake. So I'll tell you another story. I did when I was in Harvard. We had a couple of guys who wanted us to make a product for them. I'm not going to tell you who they are because that's kind of not cool. So they want to do. So I get this call on my phone. I'm at CES, and this woman who was our business development manager she was great, right? So and she had contacts everywhere. So she calls me and she says, "Man, where are you?" I'm like, "I'm over at the convention center." She says, "You got to come to the suite. These guys are here. They want a car audio party. You got to come over here." So I like get in a taxi and I haul ass over there, and it's these two dudes, and they want a product, but they don't have any time because they're at CES, right? So what they want is they want to meet somebody who can deliver some shit for them, right? So I show up over there, and I'm kind of nonplussed now. Not that I'm so these are two freaking record producers, like the most famous record producers you've ever heard of. So I walk in, and Susan says, "Hey, meet so-and-so and so-and-so." I put out my hand. I'm like, "Hey guys." And they're like, we don't have a lot of time. We got to run, but we want to come up to Harman. We want to come up to Harman and Northridge and talk to you about a product for us, for car audio. And I'm like, cool, done. They split. Right? That's it. That's the whole meeting. So 3 weeks later, I have this presentation put together. We're working on another product and whatever. And they come up, and I don't really know what to expect. One of the dudes, I don't even know what to call this guy. Right? I don't even know what to call this guy. And I'm kind of nervous, right? I'm kind of nervous because here I'm going to do this product presentation for them. So I do the product presentation for them, and they're like blown away, completely blown. And they stand up and clap. And I'm like, holy shit, right? So now they want this thing. So now I got to put one together. So we're working on one, and we go down there to do a demo. This thing's running in a computer, and we're demoing it in my boss's BMW 5 Series. And basically what this thing is it was an MS2. was a JBL MS2, which was this little thing that looked like a bar soap, and it was an EQ. And you plug your iPod into it, and you plug it into the auxiliary input of the car. You push a button, you hold it in front of your nose, it tunes the car, blah, blah, blah. So we do this demo. It's running in a PC. Two of us, James, the engineer, and I are sitting in the back seat, and these two record producers are in the front seat. It also delays one side so that you get an image in the center, right? So two record producers sitting the driver in the passenger seat in the front, and I went through a bunch of the tracks that one of these dudes mixed, and I found his target curve, and we built that target curve in so every recording would sound like one of his recordings. And so we're playing his stuff, and we push the button, and he's like, "Fuck! Holy shit! This sounds great!" Right? And like he's listening, and he's like pushing the CD button to find the other tracks because we took his tracks together, and he's like, "I don't know how you guys did it, but you found my sound." And I said, "Yeah, we found your sound." Right? So he's completely blown away. Absolutely loves it. Talks about the image in the center, whatever else. Great. They switch seats. The other guy, so this dude, I'll give you a hint. This dude mixed like Lady Gaga. Right? The first dude who loved imaging, mixed 50 Cent. Right? So he gets in the passenger seat. The other dude gets in the driver's seat. This dude mixed Fleetwood Mac. This dude mixed the Beatles, right? All this stuff. He gets in the driver's seat. We're playing his stuff. We push the button. And, of course, now it images and whatever. And he's like, "Fuck! This is the worst shit I've ever heard." He says, "What the fuck is this? That all sounds mono. Everything's coming from the center of the dash. This guy mixed the Beatles. So wait, before you cut me off. So the first dude looks over at this guy. He says, "You're an asshole." "You're an asshole. They're playing your music, man. It sounds like your music, but you never know it because you never sit behind the board. You're always sitting in the fucking couch in the corner of the studio." Dude who mixed the Beatles hated imaging.
Hey, the OG recordings were mono anyways, so.
It's probably only happened 2 or 3 times, but where a client wants to physically hear like what the subwoofer is putting.
Yes,
in,
they
right?
want to hear.
He wants to hear. Yeah, he wants to hear the resonance in the trunk, so he knows how fucking loud it's playing.
Hey, my rear speakers aren't playing.
Yeah, when it's perfectly in phase with the front mid bass and everything sounds seamless, you have no idea how much mid bass is coming out, and you have no idea how much sub bass is coming out. You just have no idea unless you can isolate the two. And some people, it's just like, I want to hear that. And then some people are like, I want to hear more. I want to hear the rears coming behind me because they think that that's what they need. And in those cases, you make that exception.
Yeah, this is sometimes a problem with legacy upmixers like Pro Logic 2 or Logic 7 or DTS Neural or whatever, is that the rear speakers are there to provide some sense of ambience. And people who do not listen to multi-channel, in a lot of cases, will go, "Hey, man, the rear speakers don't sound like they're playing." Big problem for some of these listeners. And if you read on the vehicle-specific forums, you'll find those people talking about their audio system. "Man, I turn on surround. I don't even hear the rear speakers playing anymore. What is this? What is this crap?" But so all of this gets back to this idea of our constraints and figuring out what our customers want us to do with their system, right? Because imaging requires a lot of rearranging. And a two-channel system that images perfectly in the driver's seat and doesn't do anything except disappoint people in the passenger seat is, in a lot of these cars, really hard to get back to, especially if there's no preamp adapter or whatever else. So if we can, in the parking lot with the customer, ascertain whether he needs this or doesn't need this, then our options for doing whatever it is that we need to do to make him happy become much clearer, right? So if we can find out whether imaging matters to the customer, maybe he doesn't even know what it is. So sometimes we have to introduce these things. Hey, did you realize? So listen to, where do you hear the singer? Right, they're sitting in the driver's seat, and they're in a car they're in a Harman car with QLS, right? The image is right in the center of the dash. We say, "Hey, where do you hear the singer?" They're like, "Oh man, I hear the singer right in the middle. I never even thought about that before." Now you've discovered that you have somebody that appreciates this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or can be taught to appreciate, or at least notices it. And if you say, hey man, where do you hear the singer? And he goes, yeah, I hear the singer in the center of the dash, but I don't give a shit about that. I just want it to play a lot louder. And then you go, hey man, so where's the last place that you went where you were like totally into the music? And he says, dude, we go to this club. Right now, you know that you don't have to deal with imaging. Whatever the car does now in terms of imaging is okay. What we need to do now is add a bunch of impact. We need to add a bunch of level. We need to smooth out the frequency response, all that kind of stuff, because this is what's going to make him happy. So that's all of that is part of figuring out how we're constrained and figuring out what the customer requires us to do so that we can deliver the best solution tailored to that guy.
Yeah, and to piggyback what you were just saying about kind of like doing a demo and showing the soundstage and all that kind of stuff, I've found NPR Tiny Desks to be one of the best fucking sales tools of all time.
Look for the Brian Blade and Daniel Lanois Tiny Desk.
I love just taking the phone, putting it right in the center of the dashboard, and then everything should become obvious, right? It's a visual representation of where everything should be.
Sure.
The size of the room, all of that, the acoustics should be so obvious. And that's where you can take all of these visual representation to back up your theory, or to even at the end of the demo of what you've installed to be the proof of concept for everything that you preach that whole sales process.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, there's nothing better than a great demo, except the right demo, right? So demos are great. So what I usually tell people when I'm talking to them about how to sell stuff is that sometimes the best demos ever are demos that come at a point in the sales process in which the demo confirms for the customer that we've heard them talk, that we've heard them tell their story, we understand the story, and we're going to deliver this thing, right? So sometimes we make the mistake of doing the demo first. A good salesperson knows, a trained salesperson, a person who knows how to sell things, knows the point at which the demo should happen, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes we do the demo up front because we just need to introduce somebody to what the fuck we do, right? Right? Sometimes we need to do a demo so that people will shut up, right? Because they're like, you know, they come in and they say, dude, I just need speakers. Where are the $25 speakers, right? And we're like, we don't do $25 speakers. That's not us. What do you mean you don't do 25? Speakers should never cost more than $25. Blah, blah, blah. Sometimes we grab that guy by the ear and we throw him in a car and we say, look, bro, this is what we do, right? And then either he gets involved or he leaves and we don't have to talk to him anymore. But the best demos are demos that close the sale. The demo closes the sale, where we've talked and we've told him what we're going to do, and we've told him how much it's going to be, and he hadn't quite decided. And then we go, let me show you what this is going to do. And we throw him in the car, and they go, yeah, that's it. Sometimes, if we have an idea of what the customer wants, we can shortcut the rest of the process. We can shortcut all of the talking and all of the questioning and all of the are you sure and what about this brand and what about that brand. Sometimes we can just put him in a car and say, man, this is what we do. And if we've chosen carefully, he'll go, yeah, this is exactly what I want. How much is this? And then we can say, this is $12,000. And he says, wow, so cheap. That never happens, right? So maybe he says 12 grand, huh? Yeah, I can probably swing that. We're done.
I always think a conversation of the budget needs to happen in any sales process. What were you expecting to spend to get what you thought you would get walking in here? Because everyone, no matter what you do, right? If you're going to fucking get a patio done, if you're going to go buy a car, you have a price point in your mind of what you think you're going to spend, right? So understanding that and then talking to them about what their expectations are or what they've experienced in the past, and then showing them where they fit in line with that budget. Okay, so for what you want, you have to do this, this, and this, which is going to bring you up into this price point. And then that's the conversation that happens at that point. But I think just shooting at the hip and then throwing off a number is kind of irresponsible because, again, if you're a car salesman, you have an idea of where that person's budget is by what cars they're looking at, right? They know the price point of the cars they're looking at. But if you're looking at electric cars and you hadn't seen or talked to this person and you start talking about a Prius when you also sell Tesla, it's kind of irresponsible to start talking about a Prius when they're more of a Tesla customer.
If you don't,
the Prius still does the same thing as a Tesla for the most part. You know what I mean? It's still, one just has more glitz, glam, and a finished product than the other.
of course. So I hate the term qualifying the customer because this brings up all kinds of bad habits. But what we need to do is we need to make some kind of an assessment. So no good salesperson would do what I just suggested without knowing who they're talking to. This
Right.
doesn't happen the minute the guy walks in. You don't
Of
like
course,
grab him
of
by the
course.
ear and
Yeah.
throw
Yeah,
him in
you
there.
have a full conversation first. Yeah.
Yeah, you talk to him and you figure out. You look at so hopefully you've gone to his car, or at least you've looked in the parking lot to see what he drove in, right? So did he drive in a Ford pickup, or did he drive in a 750 IL? If there's even such a thing anymore, I don't know. Whatever, right? Did he ride in on a bicycle, right? Obviously, a good salesperson is going to use this as a tool at the appropriate point. But man, I'll tell you what. When I go to buy something, and the first question out of the guy's mouth is, "What's your budget?"
Well, yeah, that should never happen, to be clear.
I never want anybody to ask me what my budget is until they've tested a good salesperson knows how to test for the budget. A good salesperson knows how to test for the budget. You show something, you hint about the price, and you let the customer push back.
As much as I do that. And again, you talk to other installers all the time that just don't get it, right? You can break it down as easy as possible and they just don't get it. And I do a lot of stuff on YouTube, and you'd be fucking shocked when you see something with elaborate fabrication, $40,000 in gear, and people think that that system they can get the same fucking thing for like $1,000.
Right. Well, this is preposterous, of course.
Exactly.
Right.
So again,
there's
an education that happens, and then you're building the rapport with the education. You're showing them that you're the professional, that you clearly know more than anyone else that they're going to come in contact with, right? They can do research till they're blue in the face, but you know more than any other source of information that they're going to find, right? You have to be the professional, and at that point, you're breaking down, you're understanding their expectation. Have you had anything installed in the past? What did you have? Because that gives you more and more ideas into, the type of system that they've had or the money that they've spent. And then once you understand everything and you have the whole thing in front of you, obviously then budget becomes some sort of a concern, because like Carlson says, how much of my time do you want? How far do you want to go into this? Because we can make it sound like fucking Phil Collins is right in front of you. You can hear the intro to Pink Floyd Time, and I could give you a piece of loose leaf paper and you can jot down where every fucking alarm clock is going off, right? You can tell me how many are playing, but that's how far in the weeds we're going to go. And everything obviously hinges off budget, or what you're comfortable with. And, as we break everything down, that's where that conversation happens. Obviously not in the beginning.
Okay. Yeah. I pretty much I agree with that. So also selling is a process of persuading somebody to trust you and to give you their money.
Mm-hmm.
You will
never sell a $60, $70, $80,000 audio system unless obviously you go there and you break everything down and get them comfortable. Because anyone spending anything over, me personally, $1,000, I'm going to want to feel comfortable and be somewhat educated on what it is I'm buying, because there's a lot of risk there. I don't want to spend $1,000 and get burned and be upset.
So that being said, if you had to help somebody listening to the podcast right now help qualify themselves and help understand if they were in the right shop or talking to the right salesman, what advice would you give to somebody, or how would you help them self-qualify? Like for you, Andy, you have what, 2 or 3 lines of speakers?
Yeah.
GB, GS, and
G,
right?
Yeah.
And when you designed those speakers, did you have like what went into that from like a thought standpoint of here's who these speakers are for, or why did you make the decisions you made to put this package together for a GB, this for a GS? Like how would you associate those to a customer, and the differences, and what type of customer each speaker would be for? And you could use that for your brand or somebody else's. Or
Well, I mean, I can't speak for other product managers because I don't know what their, I don't know what their calculus is. I don't know how they think about, audio. I've talked to some of them, and frankly, I think that one guy comes to mind. This is not a brand that anybody here has ever heard of. This is somebody that I was connected to and in another country, and they wanted to pay me some kind of a commission against sales of some product to do some, it was a DSP, to do some training for them here in the US. I'm like, dude, I got a brand. Why am I going to go out and do your thing? Well, money, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, well, so if you're planning to pay me a commission, that means that if you don't sell any of these things, then I don't make any money for going out and training for another brand. So this is not starting out at a particularly attractive place here, right? So I think it's a lot of work. I think it's not a lot of money. So what makes your DSP better than any of the other ones? Because there are like 40 DSPs on the market. And his response was, it has 12 channels. This was at a time when the most anybody's DSP had was 10 channels. I'm like, yeah, okay, so it's got 2 more channels. All right, that's cool. What else? So there's this long pause on WhatsApp because I'm talking to him 7,000 miles away. Long pause, and he comes back and he says, passion?
Sounds passionate. That's a passionate sales pitch right there.
And I'm like, I say, what? He says, well, we develop our products from passion. And I said, dude, I'm not doing your trainings. I'm not doing your trainings because you're not going to sell any of these things because it doesn't mean anything, right? Okay, so this is pretty simple. This is pretty simple for AudioFrog, and that was the perfect speaker doesn't exist and it can't. The perfect speaker doesn't exist and it can't. So this idea of point source. So we sometimes like fixate on some one unobtainium kind of a feature and we don't pay any attention to all of the other things they compromised on the way to this one perfect feature and whatever else. So there's not a perfect speaker, but we can get really close, right? And it's kind of like buying a really lightweight bicycle, right? You can buy a 40-pound bike for like $60, right? But if you want a 7-pound like racing bike, then you gotta the cost goes up.
Thousands of dollars.
The cost goes up exponentially, right? So my objective was to get as close to correct as we could get at a this is not a value price point, right? This is not a value price point. $2,000 for a component system is not a value price point. This is not velocity, right? This is not, we're going to sell 2,200,000 pairs of these things a year. That's not what this is, right? This is its value. It's compared to other things that perform similarly. This is a value. How can I get as close to that as possible and make them so they play loudly enough that people don't have to treat them like wedding cakes, right? Because there's this, so
wedding cakes.
High-end speakers.
You lost me at wedding cakes.
Yeah, you have to explain that one to us.
So years ago, and this is still kind of true with some of these brands. So years ago, high-end speakers were home speakers that weren't installed in a big wooden box. They were sent to us in a cardboard box, right? They weren't tested for cars. They weren't tested to be handled by techs and installers. in close proximity to reciprocating saws and hammers and all that kind of stuff. They were designed to
slammed in a car door 800 times.
Right. These were home audio speakers. So the pitch for these kinds of things was great sounding systems. Great sounding systems don't play loudly. And there's still kind of this sort of a thing, which is the difference between SQ and I just want to bang, right? Right? The SQ people are like, oh, I'm not into all that loud. But they are. They are. And regular customers who are driving home on a Friday night listening to their favorite music, they say they don't turn it up, but they do. They do. So I wanted a line of speakers that would sound great and still sound great when you turn up the volume. So that's what GB was. So in making great sounding speakers, there are a few rules. One of the rules, it has to be full bandwidth. It's got to play 20 hertz to 20K. Some of us can still hear 20K. Most of us can't hear, especially dudes my age. We don't hear much above 15K. It's got to be full bandwidth. It has to include bass. It has to include high frequencies. Great sounding speakers should also have a reasonably flat and smooth frequency response without any big peaks or dips. When we're talking about individual speakers like drivers, we want them to have flat frequency response within the band of frequencies that they're intended to play. So this is what all of these things were designed to do. So making speakers that sound great when you turn the volume up a lot is expensive because you need big voice coils. Minimizing distortion means that you need shorting rings and all kinds of other stuff. This is really expensive. So GS series is managing to get close to that kind of correct sound for systems that are not going to be played as loudly, right? Because like you're saying, the budget, at some point, the level of performance that's available to you has something to do with your budget, right? So for somebody who can't afford a $2,000 component system, he's got to give up something. He's got to give up something. So for AudioFrog, since we're an audio company, he's got to give up massive power handling and the ability to play 170 dB or whatever. This is what you give up. If you can't spend $2,000, then it's not going to play as loud. It'll still sound great. It'll still sound great. The frequency response will still be smooth. It'll still be accurate, but you can't power it with 450 watts. And I think this is lost on some people where they think that every speaker...
So let me get that straight. So when we have 450 watts, we get GBs.
That's what these dudes do. That's what these dudes do. So at GS price points, we need to make a great sounding speaker that costs a little bit less. Or a lot less, or whatever. So you still get clarity and you still get an accurate sound. You just can't play it as loud. And then with G series, so GS is everything is sold a la carte: crossovers, tweeters, mid ranges, woofers, everything's a la carte. For G, we need to hit a slightly lower price point. And we wanted to simplify this a little bit. So if you're an installer and you're selling stuff, if you're working in a shop that also installs, then managing the a la carte nature of GS and GB is not really a problem for our target shops. But for DIYers and sometimes you want everything to come in a single box, a single box solution or whatever else. So that's really what G series is for. It's not really a series, it's one product. It's G60S and it's a 6-inch component system. Everything comes in the box. And everything else is a la carte.
Totally unrelated question, but GB, GS, and G, where do those letter combinations come from?
Well, so GB stands for Gary Biggs, and this was,
I knew that, and that's why I asked you the question. I was going to ask you,
GS
does that somehow correlate with Gary Biggs?
Yeah, one of our partners who is a dude overseas. Sometimes in order to get people to invest, you agree to do things that they want you to do. And one of the things that he insisted on was that we needed to have a Gary Biggs series of speakers. And I said, I'm not naming any series of speakers after a person because this is a really dangerous thing to do, right? Because things happen to people, right? Things happen to people. And So I agreed that we would name them GB series, and he came on board as a partner. So GB is stands for Gary Biggs. GS is nothing. GS is G something, and G is less than GS because it's only one letter.
That's hilarious because somehow, like, I had a hunch that GB was Gary Biggs, and that's what made me ask that question. And it's funny how you broke
we have a series of outdoor speakers. And we have a new one. We have an 8-inch two-way outdoor speaker coming up. But these things are called AW25s and AW28s. Actually, now they're AW25T and AW28T. Somebody said, "Hey man, so Gary Biggs got his line of speakers, so now you had to do one AW for Andy Wehmeyer." I'm like, bro, it stands for all weather. So no, that's So that's what the letters are for.
So your GB is your no compromise speaker. When you deal with people and you get questions online and you're helping people with system designs, what mistakes do you see being made in system design, or what's frustrating to you to see people do with your product or anybody's product for that matter?
Besides drive speakers with 3 times the amount of power that they're rated to handle. There's a bunch of stuff. The notion that every speaker should be crossed over as low as it can possibly be crossed over is an example of taking something too far. And in a lot of cases, it's taken so far that not only do you wear speakers out much more quickly, but it can in fact make getting to a particular objective much more difficult than if they didn't believe that they had to do it that way, right? And so one of the biggest mistake here. So besides thinking that you have to cross a tweeter over super low, whatever. So the first job of a crossover is to keep the small speaker safe. The second job of the crossover is to blend the sound of the mid range in the tweeter, or the mid bass in the mid range, or the subwoofer and the mid bass. So in order to blend correctly, we need to cross the mid range over, if possible, without breaking rule number 1, in an area where the dispersion from the mid range is still wide. This is loudspeaker building 101. Maybe it's 201. But one of the mistakes I see is people trying to cross the tweeter over at impossibly low frequencies to keep the mid-range from beaming. This is not the right way to manage that compromise. The right way to manage the compromise is to keep the tweeter safe. Keep the tweeter safe. If you're really serious about keeping speakers out of the range in which they beam, then you need a 3-way. Because a 6-inch and a tweeter is not a great combo, right?
Well, you have something interesting in that scenario, though, because you have an 1.5 inch. A GB15 is a 1.5 inch.
Yeah, 1.5 inch tweeter.
That plays extremely low. And Matt and I talk about this a lot because I use a lot of home audio tweeters in 2-way systems where tweeters are crossed over low because it's a 2-way, and that really helps. A lot of times they have much larger voice coils, and we're using them in locations, again, to fit budgets where we're trying to cut down on amplifier channels and DSP channels, and they work well in that scenario. The GB15 is one of the few tweeters that I am more than comfortable with using in a 2-way setup.
That's what it's for.
It's exactly what it's for, and it works extremely well. I'll shut up. I won't tell every other car audio manufacturer they're screwing up by not doing something like that. But congratulations, because it's an amazing tweeter and it works really well in that scenario.
Before we continue, Andy, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
And it goes to the GB question that I gave you. And this is a big misconception of what this actually stands for. But what does the W in automotive motor oil stand for? We're all car guys. So say 5W30. What does the W stand for?
I have no idea.
I think I know. I thought it was weight.
No.
30 weight motor oil? Isn't that what is the W for?
Winter. That's what it stands for. It's
Really?
how viscous the oil is in the winter.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
Yep. It's not weight. That's the biggest misconception of all time. Little fun fact for you.
Thank you.
All right, continue about the tweeters.
So Andy, when you were saying like people often suggest crossing over extremely low, what are you defining extremely low?
Well, so tweeters, we need to be ideally we need to be like two times resonance. Depending on how steep the slope is and what we're doing and how careful we are when we tune, we can get a little closer. We get a little closer than 2x. So crossing tweeters over too low is not as bad as the next one, and that is that thinking that we need, in order to get the sound of the bass to be in the front and in order to have great mid bass, we need a mid bass driver that we can put in the door that we can cross over at 40 hertz.
Matt and I are big.
Yes.
This sucks.
100% with you there.
This is stupid. So it's stupid for a whole bunch of reasons. One, there's a cross-car mode in every car that creates a big dip at about 70 hertz. And we want to manage that dip, right? We want to manage that dip in some other way. Secondly, 40 hertz is not mid-bass. 40 hertz is sub-bass. 40 hertz is sub-bass. And your 12-inch woofer does a much better job at 40 hertz than your little 6-inch or even an 8-inch driver in the door can ever do, because it's so much more cone area. So the other problem with 40 hertz in the door and this notion that, oh, I got my mid-bass crossed over at 35, right, is that your mid-bass driver probably has a resonance of 60 hertz, 70 hertz or so. Free air resonance is, we should not be playing speakers except for subwoofers at resonance because they make the most distortion at resonance. The spider of the speaker is designed only really to have any kind of an effect on the sound of the speaker or on the speaker at all below resonance. So when we cross the speaker over way below resonance, we exercise the spider in a way that it's not intended to be exercised. We wear the spider out like an old shoe, and we play the speaker at a band of frequencies that it's not intended to be used because it makes a massive amount of distortion there. This is the worst thing ever, and it makes the car virtually untunable. We never get to the point of having great mid bass when we think that we need to cross the mid bass driver over at 40 hertz. And I know a couple of guys who are on this like quest. They're on this quest for the most awesome mid bass ever, and they refuse to back up. They refuse to back up from this method by which they're going to get the greatest mid bass ever. And the way that they're going to get the greatest mid bass ever is by finding a subwoofer that will play all the way up to 600 hertz or 1,000 hertz or whatever else. And that's how they're going to do it. So this speaker cannot be built. The speaker cannot be made. The speaker cannot exist. So they're on this never-ending quest for a speaker that nobody in their right mind would even try to make because it's unnecessary, because it's not the right way to do it. So this is the other pet peeve, is having to talk people out of this notion that they need to cross their front stage over at super low in order to get bass to sound like it comes from the front of the car.
Yeah, in every car I've ever heard that has played, and again, we talked about this. I jokingly posted on something that you were posting about online, where I actually did a car that didn't have a subwoofer, and we let the doors play all the way down, and I think I was kind of combating that a little bit, but it was more of a joke that.
Well, so in that system, the doors are the subwoofer.
Yeah, they're playing all the way down. They were still crossed over to protect them, but they played down.
Right. So a subwoofer, we have to use a subwoofer. We have to use a subwoofer at or below resonance because we have to. Fortunately, if we can get a subwoofer that has a resonance of 25 or 28 or 30 hertz, there's only an octave, half an octave below that, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't hear distortion at really, really low frequencies. But the second harmonic, is 60 hertz, is 120 hertz, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Every car I've ever heard that has had, like, as soon as you get into a car that has door mid basses crossed over, I would say usually lower than that, maybe 70 hertz, you instantly pick up on how muddy the sound is and how much energy is resonating the door panel, and just everything there just goes nuts, and it never sounds in focus. I don't
It
know.
doesn't sound like great
Pick your
mid-bass
word.
either.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like great mid-bass either. So it freaks me out when people do something like this and then it doesn't work, right? So instead of thinking, maybe it's not the right way to do this, they think it's a gear. It's the gear, right? So on the one hand, we have 90% of the performance of the system is the installation until the installation doesn't work, right? And then it's like, no, it's the gear. So wait a minute. Is it the installation or is it the gear? So sometimes when stuff doesn't work, it's because we're doing shit the wrong way. So at the beginning of this, Gary, you mentioned this document that I wrote about how to tune a car, and that there's a lot of people that say no, that's wrong, and you have to do this other way, and you have to do it this way and that way, and no, you should do this first, you should do that first, and no, you have to listen, and Andy says you should never listen to the car. All of this is of course crap. There are as many ways to tune a car as there are to drive from LA to New York. There's only one fastest way. There's only one most direct way. There are an infinite number of more scenic ways. Right? So for me, a process is good when it is efficient. First, it has to get to the point at which the thing works, right? The point at which a stereo system works is a very simple thing. When we can never quite get there in a car, but correct is correct. When the sound of the left speaker and the sound of the right speaker are closely matched, and they match some target curve, and the sound arrives in phase, the system works. The stereo system works. And when it works, we hear instruments across the dash according to how they're panned in the recording. If somebody is mixed in the center, we hear them sing in the center. We hear the sound of a room. We can identify that there is a room, and we can identify that there is depth in the recording, if it's in the recording. We should hear the tonal quality of the instruments as close to accurately as is in the recording, right? We should be able to, if we know what the sound of a bassoon is, then we should be able to say, hey, man, that sounds like a bassoon, so long as it sounds like a bassoon in the recording, right? And we should hear, if we're talking about a SQ car that images, we should hear the impact that happens from the instruments in the front of the car sort of cohesively with the rest of the speakers. And we're not going to hear, like you mentioned earlier, Matt, we don't hear this, we may not hear the sound of the speaker. We may not hear the sound of the instrument come from the speaker. So this is stereo. This is what stereo recordings are designed to do. This is what stereo systems are designed to do, right? When they're correct, that's what we hear. We can't get all the way to correct because there's so many reflections in the car and whatever. Things are never quite in phase, but they don't have to be. Fortunately, there is a shitload of room for error. There's a shitload of room for error, and for us to be able to say, wow, that sounds great. Right? So we get wound up in this notion that additional performance always attends additional precision. And this is just absolutely not true. And this is primarily what happens when people consider Andy's process and they say, oh, that's only 80%. Oh, that's only 80%. You have to do all this other stuff. Well, the other stuff, of course, you need to listen after you're done and decide whether you've compromised correctly in this way or that way because you only had 15 EQ bands, or whatever else. Of course, you have to listen. But I think that the additional 20% that they're talking about is a few tweaks for preference. A few tweaks for preference.
I think that there's a few things that lead to that kind of difference, and part of that is what, when we're trying to qualify a customer and see what level of gear they need and what level of install they need. If we take that tuning and that ability to match the left and right speaker and to set delays and to get things to be in phase, right? And we do that without taking care of every resonance in the car, right? There's a huge room for improvement by taking out those resonances. We can change speakers. You can take a lower quality speaker, replace it with a higher quality speaker, and get a better sound, more focus, more detail, right? But that initial right or wrong, no matter whether you put in a $200 set of front speakers or a $2,000 set of front speakers, what becomes most important first is that it is dialed in correctly. And this is
Absolutely.
the way Matt and
Exactly.
I both...
And that goes to manufacturer speakers. If you listen to a Meridian fucking set of speakers in a Land Rover or a Jaguar, you're like, fuck, this sounds really good. And that's a sales tool that I use all the time, because the type of components that they're using, obviously they're very cost efficient. They're very lightweight. The amplifiers are producing little power, not clean power, and it's sounding that good with that shitty type of equipment. So obviously, if you have the understanding and the education to physically tune a car correctly, and you're using great equipment, great amplifiers, you're going to get a much better product.
Right. I also, the funny part to me is we end up fixing a lot of cars and tuning a lot of cars that other shops have done. And as Matt and I have had a lot of conversations on 2-way versus 3-way setups and meeting budgets and where you put those dollars and whether it goes to more amp channels and not as much on a, do we want to put in a lower level 3-way but add more channels, or do we put in a higher end 2-way and not spend as much money on amplification and DSP? We've had Matt and I go over that, it seems like, on a weekly basis, right? But in those scenarios, how much of a difference it's going to make on quality of one speaker versus another. And when we see great gear put in and people making it difficult because of speaker locations, right? Like I have a car, Andy, in the Bay right now. Matt knows of this, but we have a car in the Bay that had a nice set of 3-ways in the front of it, all hand built, made in the USA amplifiers in it. And I get in the guy's car because it's not making music. And there's a nice set of fabricated pods with a 4-inch right on axis. And I look at the customer, and I'm like, where are your tweeters? Oh, they're in the factory locations in the dash firing at the glass. And it's like, okay, now I know why 5 other people have tried to tune this car and nobody's happy with it. Why wouldn't you have put the mid-range in the dash location, put the tweeter on axis? Like these things, you just took the wrong path.
Right. Yes, this happens all the time. So I almost don't even want to agree to tune cars anymore because I'm an eternal optimist, right? When somebody calls me and says, "Hey man, will you tune my car?" I want to do it, right? Because I know that given the right circumstances, I'll be able to make the guy's day, right? But I always overestimate the circumstances every single time, because there's never been, no, I take it back. One time, somebody showed up with a car that I could tune without having
right
to,
out of the box. You can plug in, everything is done right.
Yes, without having to like drive down the street to Harbor Freight and get some tool, because I don't have a bunch of tools in the office. They're all at home, right? So like, oh, we'll need to remove the seat here, or I'll need to like cut all the veins in my wrist by trying to remove this board in the trunk that's been screwed in with 6-inch sheetrock screws that are extending this far behind the mounting surface. It never happens. So I just don't even want to do it. I just don't even want to do it anymore because cars in general cannot be tuned until they're fixed. And I remember this at, when I worked in retail, it was the same thing. People would bring in cars that they weren't happy with, and when I was a tech, halfway through my time as a tech, somebody would bring me a mess, and I would take the seat out, because back then amps went under seats. I would take the seat out, and I would find a rat's nest of wires, and I'd be the first guy in the front of the store yelling and screaming, "This fucking thing is trash. It all has to be removed, and everything has to be reinstalled," because it was a mess. And then later, when I sort of had to manage installers and found myself on the sales floor, it's a completely different perspective. I was like, okay, so it probably all doesn't have to be removed. Probably something is wrong, right? The fact that it's messy isn't the problem. The fact that something is wrong is the problem. So I would have to make these deals with the installers. It's like, look, tell you what, If you remove everything and reinstall it with new wires and all this kind of stuff, and it doesn't fix the problem, you pay for the wires, and you don't get paid for the labor. Right?
I'll figure it out real quick.
Right. So then they would go back and they would come back in 5 minutes and they would say, oh, yeah, the terminal's broken on this speaker. Oh, okay, cool. So he needs a new speaker. Right. Yes. Okay. So we'll sell him a new speaker. Tuning cars is difficult because often things are not installed correctly. Often somebody told somebody else that they needed to connect it in some other way, like the fours on axis and the tweeters in the dash, or somebody told me I needed to put the left front mid bass out of phase, or God knows what, right? There's a passive crossover connected to the tweeter, and it's a two-way crossover. There's nothing connected to the mid-range output because the mid-range is on another channel of the amplifier. The guy turns the system up and it cuts out. It's like, well, that's because you can't do that with a passive crossover, right? So it just always turns into.
Well, I would say this too. One of our biggest problems with installers is they just have no reference for audio, right? Their reference is off of the last system that they tuned, and they sit in the car, and if it quote unquote plays music and it doesn't sound obviously bad to them, then they think it's acceptable and okay, and they ship it. And that's the big problem, because again, Gary and I have talked about on the podcast numerous times, we can get into a car, and this is the biggest problem with like sitting in cars at CES or SEMA and shit like that, Knowledge Fest, because like in 2 seconds you can tell if a car's bad or wrong or not correct, right? And that's a big problem. Why are manufacturers letting these cars go in their booth and they're playing stuff and it's not correct?
I think those that care enough do, and they make sure that they're good. And to clarify that for the people listening at home, if we take audio and look at it as a picture, there's one thing between having the brightness of the colors and it's a well staged photograph and the lighting is good, and it's another thing where like, hey, that's not where the tree was, right? There's another thing when it's like there's no color here, or it's black and white, it's missing stuff. Like it becomes that obvious. But once you get to where
like you should know immediately if you get in a car, and I've done this numerous times with like some of the installers at Sound Effects, when they're educated enough to tune a car and they know the process, but they might not understand if it's correct in the end, because you can follow a process, but you might not be educated or have a reference enough point to know if it's correct. And I'll get in a car and I can localize both mid bass, but everything else sounds center. And I'm like, your mid bass is definitely out of phase. And then I flip it real quick and bam, it sounds very good again.
So this is precisely, so I agree with this, but I want to go one step further. And that is that as professionals, our job is to deliver something to our customer that is reliable, that looks nice, and that sounds good. Right? So looks nice can be all hidden, or looks nice can be one of your unbelievably beautiful systems, Matt. And this is really up to the customer's preference and his budget and what he wants out of the system. But if in order to deliver a car that sounds acceptable, that gets close to what I described earlier, which is left and right matched in phase sort of, and frequency response or whatever, so that when we listen, we hear a center image and we hear the impact in the front of the car, right? All of that kind of stuff. If we have to rely on having an army of techs who love audio enough to deliver that, we suck, because that's fucking stupid. That's stupid. The whole reason for this process that I wrote is so that people who do not love audio can still deliver this car.
I think the difference, though, Andy, and this is in talking and dealing with customers. Like I've tuned cars for people who have bought a kit and they've read your whole deal and they get through it and they're like, they get frustrated, right?
Right.
Like it's not for everybody. It's
it
like
takes
everything.
practice.
It takes follow through.
It takes
follow through and practice.
People
and
think that they watch a YouTube video and they know how to do it.
Right. The difference is Matt and I can fire a car up, and as soon as we see a channel on the RTA, we get a real quick understanding if we're anywhere in the ballpark or there's something wrong without ever listening to the system, without ever doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, you sit in a car and you listen to When Doves Cry by Prince, and his fucking voice starts on the right channel, and you're like, this is wrong. It's flopped. You know what I mean? It's stuff like that I think just installers or people that are tuning cars, they just don't have the reference for the music. So when they're playing different tracks in the end, they're not listening to what they should be listening to understand if it's right. And that's a problem.
But we have to. So the reason that the CD that comes with the test kit has the tracks on it that it has is so that we don't have to use that Prince track. We don't have to.
Right.
We don't have to know where Prince is. We have tracks that are specifically designed to help them say left is left, right is right, whatever.
Exactly. And you have that. You have an AudioFrog CD, and you have the left of center, all that kind of stuff, where it's precisely measuring out and mapping out exactly where the sound should be. I agree with that. And you've done a great job of that with your test track CD.
So the idea here is to make it possible for people who love to fabricate, but who are not in love with audio, to deliver a passable car. We, as an industry, we have to be able to consistently and reliably deliver cars that sound good, whether our tech loves audio or not.
we just have a hard time I have a hard time wanting to believe that there's guys out there installing that don't actually love music.
There are.
It's hard for me to swallow.
Gary, I talk to these
time with it.
It's because we're so passionate, Gary, that it's just hard to believe.
Well, so you guys have both been doing this for a really long time, and you got into it because you loved audio. I did the same thing. I love audio. This is why I do this. But we have people who love to fabricate. We have people teaching fabrication who love to fabricate, but who are not interested enough in the audio to learn about it. People inventing new ways to fabricate who tell Andy, not bad for the 20 minutes I spent tuning it.
And that's what I don't get. At the end of the day, it all comes down to audio.
We don't have to get it. We have to enable that guy to, with as much dedication as he's willing to devote to this part, we have to be able to tell that guy, dude, you have to deliver a passable system. This is a passable system. Here is a system that you can do without loving it. I fabricate in order to make a car that sounds good. I do not like to fabricate. I do not like to fabricate. There's some times when it's kind of fun, right? But I do not want to be in a 4-week fabrication job to get a subwoofer in a car. And I have this Volvo XC90. There's no space for a sub. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't just put a big square ass box in the back, but that's what I want to do. So I have to fabricate. I don't love this. But I do it. And I do it in a way that when somebody opens the trunk of the car, they see something that doesn't suck, right? The trunk of my Mercedes is not a beautiful, like, custom looking thing. You open it and it looks like a trunk. There's a 24-channel amp that I built in my garage in the trunk, right? Why did I fabricate that? Did I want to build a 24-channel amp? No. I fabricated it because I didn't want a trunk full of somebody else's amps, right? I hate to fabricate, but I can do it, right? So people who hate to tune, or people who think that they can't learn to tune, in order to deliver passable cars, have to be able to do it. Or the guy who owns the shop needs to assign somebody as the guy who makes sure that these cars are passable. So the problem that I see, and I visited a lot of shops before COVID, and I visited a lot of shops for 20 years all over the world. Shops all over the world. It's all the same. Everybody thinks that there's this massive difference between here and there. The big difference between here and there is the level of education that that an average installer has, right? There are some places in the world where installers cannot read. Not don't want to read. like open a manual and do not know what the letters mean. This is a humongous challenge. Imagine that, right? Imagine that. So the problem is a problem of mercantilism. And that is that the guy, in most cases, who owns the shop, sometimes is kind of an audio enthusiast, but in a lot of cases, he's a merchant. He's a merchant, and he has some experience in car audio. Maybe he was a tech, but if he owns a shop now, he's mostly a merchant, unless it's an owner-operator guy who's an installer. This guy wants to minimize cost. And I swear there are enough of these 12-volt jobs forums and Indeed and Monster and all of the other classified employment websites and whatever with people looking for installers. People are looking for, I can't find enough installers. Man, we're booked out 6 months. I can't find installers. And I read these ads. People are trying to hire installers for less money than people make at McDonald's. People want to hire installers for $35,000 a year. Who do you think you get? Who do you think you get for $35,000 a year? Somebody you can train? Maybe. Who's training them? Is there a training program in your store? If you're hiring people for $35,000 and you want to turn them into people who can deliver beautiful installations that sound great, whose job is it to turn that $35,000 guy into a $75,000 guy?
And then the big problem is, because I've witnessed this in the past with other places that I've been, is when that person proves himself, right, and they've done all the diligent work in order to do that and to show that they've educated themselves to get to a certain level, the fucking companies aren't willing to pay them and give them an adequate raise for a living wage. And that's another big problem. They want to keep them at that $35,000 scale.
So I went to do it. So I went to do a training for a dealer. This was a long time ago. The guy tells me I get there early, and the guy's got this idea about how he wants me to do this training, and I'm kind of like, dude, I do me, man. So tell me what the objective is, but don't tell me how to get there, right? So what's the objective? So we talk about the objective. Everybody should, at the end of this training, everybody should be able to do this and this and, whatever else and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right, cool. I got 2 days. I can deliver this, I think. So I go downstairs. All these guys show up, and I start the training by asking them, how many of you are going to be millionaires? Every tech, every installer raised his hand. He's going to be a millionaire. I said, what are you going to do to get there? Not like a million. I mean, millionaire is like, when I was a kid, millionaire was like billionaire now, right? But I just use millionaire. And every one of them, when I pointed at them and asked them how they were going to get there, they all said, I'm going to work hard. And I said, all right, cool. I didn't tell them they were full of shit. but they're all going to be millionaires, and that's fine, and that's a kind of ambition, right? And sometimes when we hear that from people, we think, cool, they're willing to work, right? They're going to put in the work. Because you can't do epic shit with non-epic people, and you can't do $1 million work with a $3 work ethic, and that means that they're going to work. So this guy tells me, I got a guy, his name is Jimbo. If at the end of this training, Jimbo gets it, I'll know that you were successful. So I train them all day. We have 2 days. I train them all day. At the end of the first day, we're going to tune a car together. And I want them to help me tune a car the first day, and then they're going to do it the second day. I want them to help me tune a car. And as we do it, I want somebody to be the documentarian. So I need a documentarian. And so I hand a clipboard and a pen to Jimbo. And I'm like, dude, so write down this process. You're in charge of writing down this process, because I cannot get this guy to engage for the whole day, right? He's like standing in the back and whatever, and he's my test. So I hand him a clipboard. I asked him to write down the process. So it comes to like equalizing for the correct frequency response. Hands me back the clipboard. I'm like, dude, what's going on? He says, man, I don't know how to spell frequency. So I said, try. Just write down something that you think is right, because it doesn't matter. What you're doing here is keeping track. Wouldn't do it. Hands you back the clipboard, goes and stands in the back. So we finish, we tune the car. I go back up to the guy who owns the store, and I said, man, I can't teach Jimbo. I can't teach Jimbo. He's not there yet. I'm teaching 6th grade math. This dude's not out of kindergarten. I said, you have 5 guys. You have 5 stores, you have 5 guys. I know who is your lead in each of those 5 stores because these are the guys that I can teach. Jimbo will never be successful doing this. You should fire him because he's not going to be successful. I said, you got a bunch of other guys in the middle. I can't teach those guys today either, but I can teach your 5 guys who can eventually teach the rest of the guys in their store. I said, I think that's how you have your store set up. I said, so tomorrow I'm going to focus on your 5 guys and help them with some tools that they can use to teach the other guys in the store. But this is the best that I'm going to be able to do for you. And he looked at me and he didn't know what to say because I told him that his guy was basically a turd.
What do you think Jimbo's doing nowadays?
Probably still working there. Probably still working there. I think he's probably still working there. Because this dude with these 5 stores, this guy believes that installation is a necessary evil. If he could sell every product out the door without having to spend any money on installers, that's what he would do.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's the dream scenario for a shop owner. Is that all day long? You know, back in the day, it was deck and four. To tie it back to Andy's earlier conversation, deck 4 and antenna.
Yes,
that was the days.
But those days, so maybe there's a business to be done in deck and 4s. I don't know. I mean, how many 88 Civics are left?
Right. Especially those that haven't had the antenna. I don't know if Matt knows how you put the twist in the end of the antenna. So as you're fishing it down the pillar,
yes,
you can rotate it so that it flops around and finds its way through.
Finds its way out of that little square.
I've done plenty of antennas in my day. Don't confuse me.
How many antennas have you installed, Matt?
Probably over 70.
Really?
Easily, yes.
Damn. Okay.
So Jimbo was that $35,000 a year guy. He probably made less. I can't imagine it. I think this dude was probably I think this guy was probably making $200 a week. But why do you need a $200 a week guy working on $75,000 a year cars?
Maybe he had passion.
He didn't have enough passion to fucking Google how to spell frequency response. Right? So I don't know. But so the problem from my vantage point here, is that this is now a tech job.
Mm-hmm.
This is now a tech job. It's not all tech. You don't have to be a coder, right? You don't have to be a coder to do this job. But if you can't operate a PC, if a PC does not represent a way to simplify something for you and is instead additional complexity, then you need to do something else. Or maybe you're the wiring guy, right? But you're not a tech.
Well, so what you're saying resonates with me a lot because I think about a lot of mechanics nowadays and specifically Tesla mechanics, right? Most of those guys have no fucking clue the technical aspect of what they do, right? You know,
yeah, and they suck at changing oil.
we've dealt, yeah, they definitely don't know what the W stands for in oil. No chance. But I've communicated with enough people. I mean, there's a mass exodus of Tesla. A lot of the people who were my contacts at Tesla are now leaving Tesla. But from the tech side, they just have no idea what they're talking about. You know, you try and break down like the communication systems of the Tesla, and they're just looking at the computer and they're just, you know, going line by line of what their diagnose is for whatever they're trying to do. And they just have no idea what they're talking about. None of them.
Right. They don't have a full understanding of all of the systems
None.
in the
None.
car.
They don't. They don't know how it works or operates. Nope.
Right. Well, it's been this way with mechanics for a really long time. Ever since OBD2, basically, where troubleshooting was not understanding something in a kind of a comprehensive way, so that you can identify places that you can test in order to determine, is the problem here, so that you can zero in on a thing. Because OBD2 is like, oh, plug in the computer, it'll tell you what's wrong with it, right? Mm-hmm. Replace this module. Oh, fuck, it's still not fixed. Well, but you replaced the module, so there's $1,200 to the customer. So fixing a $20 thing might cost you $2,600 because of the troubleshooting, because there's no troubleshooting. And this is what companies do. They make jobs smaller and smaller and smaller so that those jobs are easily replaceable, right? An excellent troubleshooter is an expert. How many of those are there, right? You got to pay that dude because there are only like 5 of them, right? But if you could turn that troubleshooting job into somebody who reads lines of code, right? Who reads lines of code and says, oh, that means it's the thingamajiggy, we replace that, right? This is a small job. So when you make jobs smaller, you make people more expendable, and you make it possible to pay them less. And that's not cheap, right? Because the investment in the tools required to make those jobs small is huge. So I think what we have in a lot of car audio shops is this idea that we can make the jobs really small, right? And it's not really a big job, right? I need one lead fab guy, right? Then I need a bunch of underlings, right? I can pay all those underlings $20,000 because this lead dude is going to make sure that all of these $20,000 guys are going to, that nothing leaves that sucks. So this lead tech is going to be in charge of that. But that's not really how this works. So I think that the problem in unsatisfied customers is that we're not willing to charge enough, and we're not willing to pay. We're not willing to pay enough. So there are a lot of reasons for that, and I hear a lot of excuses as I talk to people. I mean, we go into stores and I have people say, I don't really have anybody asking for that. Yeah, of course. Right? So I don't really have anybody asking for that. It can mean two things, right? That can mean, oh, I have to do work, or it can mean, oh, if I do a little bit of work, I'll be the only person in town who has this.
Right.
And I can sell it for a lot because I'm the only person in town who has it, right? So we have techs that aren't techs. This is not everybody, of course. We have a lot of great techs, right? We have a lot of great techs. We also have a lot of guys who really shouldn't be working in the bays because they don't want to do it. They'll do anything. They'll do anything. They're looking for a $36,000 a year job because the one they have is a $34,000 a year job, right?
100%.
We have guys. We have shop owners who hire people because they can't get them to leave the store.
Also true.
Right? Hey, man, if you're going to be here all day, pick up a broom. And we think that in like 6 months, that dude is going to be like IOTY on his own. We don't have a training program. We're not going to even send him to Knowledge Fest, right? We're gonna tell him to go to Harbor Freight and spend his first 12 checks on tools because he's got to have his own tools, and then somehow he's just going to turn himself into this dude who can do everything. The same problem.
Story of Tom Miller.
The same thing exists on sales floors. The same thing exists on sales floors. In this industry, we hire people who won't leave, and we put them on the sales floor, and we think, yeah, if he doesn't sell anything, he doesn't make any money. This is the worst perspective ever, because if he's on the sales floor and he's talking to people and he's not making any money, he's burning customers.
Lost opportunities, yeah.
He's burning
100%.
customers out the door. And who's teaching him how to sell? Who's teaching him how to sell?
especially in 2021 when people walking into your store are looking to spend money because they've taken the amount of time to leave their house to drive to your business and walk in your store to talk to somebody who they perceive is more educated than themselves.
Right, because you're not Best Buy. Nobody knows where you are. If you're a car at retail, nobody knows where you are. Right? They gotta look for you. And then they're gonna have to use. Everybody knows where Best Buy is. Right? Everybody knows because everybody drives by a Best Buy every day on your way to the store, on your way to work, somewhere there's a Best Buy. But car audio stores are like down a street and then a side street and then off to the right and behind somewhere, right? So if somebody's coming to your store, they're gonna like Google their way to your store, right? So they're doing work. They're doing work to get there. And if we don't have the good sense to have them talk to somebody who knows what the sales process is. The sales process is getting a customer to say yes to the coolest thing that he will enthusiastically pay for. Mm-hmm. If we don't have 100%. Salespeople who understand that, we don't have salespeople. The rest of getting the how you do that is and it's not a matter. I see a lot of sales trainings where it's like, okay, when the customer comes in, you say this. Good afternoon, sir. Are you interested in an alarm system or would you like to drive inconveniently? Because if we trick them into saying, I want an alarm system, then all we have to do is lead them to display number 1. And in this display, we show them the remote control. Do you like 4 buttons or 3 buttons, or would you like the one with the LCD? Well, obviously he likes the one with the LCD because it's cooler. Now we lead them to display number 2, right? So this is the Play-Doh fuzzy pumper of sales, and it doesn't work. Because the assumption in the Play-Doh fuzzy pumper of sales is that we're going to trick the guy into the inevitable. And the inevitable is that if we get to display number 17 in our Play-Doh fuzzy pumper, that he now has no choice but to say yes. But this is not how customers work. Because customers don't give a fuck about the Play-Doh fuzzy pumper. They'll say no anywhere in this process. They'll just walk out, right? It's the worst thing ever. So we've got guys,
or they'll do their own research in front of you on their phone.
Right. So the job of the job of selling is thinking on your feet. The job of selling is thinking on your feet so that you can maintain control of the process.
You got to have an answer for everything that the customer is ever going to throw at you.
So right. Can we flip this around for a second and for those listening at home that are consumers, right? How do they know they're in the right shop or in the wrong shop? Like Andy, you see a lot of different dealers and you obviously can assess skill level and the quality of work and that kind of stuff. What advice or what can you do to guide a customer to know if they're either in the wrong place to identify that quickly or signs to look for or questions to ask to make sure that they're in the right place?
Well, they're probably in the wrong place first.
It's more likely.
The likelihood.
The law of averages says.
Yes, the law of averages says that you're probably in the wrong place. There are a lot of stores. So it's. I think that it's important for consumers in this category to recognize that there are really two parts. There are really two parts of their process. I have this conversation with consumers all the time. I often have it after they've made a purchase because I'm explaining to them why it didn't go the way they wanted it to go. That there are really two parts. There's the gear. And there's the implementation of the gear. There's the gear and the implementation of the gear. And that as consumers, we often tend to believe that that the job of installing products is mounting them and connecting them. And that once they're mounted and connected, they do what they do, right? And this is really not the case anymore, right? This is kind of the case in home audio, and this is why there's all kinds of ridiculous home audio bullshit, is because home audio is really buying the gear and hooking it up. And kind of making sure that the speakers are in the right place and that you sit in the right place.
Right. Speaker
Little
placement is
variables
actually
in a home.
huge.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah,
Speaker
but it's not
placement is
that
But besides
huge.
that,
But it's not that huge, right? We need to sit in between the speakers, and then we hear an image, right? So there's room treatment and getting rid of resonances, and there's all of that, all that
Comparative
other
to
kind
a
of
car,
stuff.
yes.
Yes, comparative to a car, there's a lot less intervention that's required. So there's the gear, and we need to get the right gear. We need to get good gear, right? We don't want to. If we buy $10 speakers, it's not going to sound great. If we buy some no-name brand amplifier that nobody's ever heard of for like $6, the odds are not in our favor, right? Good stuff costs money. Good stuff costs money. There is no free money, right? So we can't buy at the bottom and expect to have great performance. We also probably don't need to buy all the way at the top unless we're like a super duper enthusiast. So we need to kind of qualify ourselves first. What am I really after, right? But the other thing is that we need, in this category, we need quality implementation. We need quality implementation. And that means that we need somebody who knows how to do this work. And just like we're not going to skimp on our choice of DSP, we also shouldn't believe that finding somebody who's going to do this, the $100 you save on installation will be the worst $100 you ever saved. The $100 you save on installation will be the worst $100. The $1,000 you save on installation will be the worst $10,000 you ever spent later. And I see this all the time. People call me, they've been to 6 stores. They've paid 6 times. They still haven't given up. Who loves a category more than that guy? How much more passion do you have to have? I don't go anywhere 6 times. Right? I'm not going to try anything 6 times. These people have been to every store in town. Now they're calling me because they're like, I've been to every store in town. Do you know anybody within 1,000 miles who can take care of this? Who loves car audio more than that guy? Nobody. So this is what I tell them. And then I tell them these two things go hand in hand. People who do great installation cannot keep the doors open by doing great installation. People who do great installation keep the doors open by also selling you the product that they're going to install, because they make some money on the product and they make some money on the installation. And this is how they stay in business. I explained this to the Amazon buyer who wanted AudioFrog in Amazon. And I said, I put AudioFrog in Amazon. It's the last AudioFrog I'll sell, and it's the last AudioFrog you'll sell, because you need independent retailers to be in business, because you don't provide any kind of customer service other than a return label. And I said, in some categories, that's fine. It's not fine in my category, and it's not fine for my brand. But you should understand that these retailers, in order to stay open to do installations, have to sell product. And when you put them out of the product business, then you put the category out of business. And the guy was shocked. He's like, man, nobody's ever talked to me that way. I said, well, nobody from Amazon ever called me before.
you call back tomorrow, I'll tell you the same thing.
He flew down here and I took him to lunch because he wanted to understand the category, which was the most awesome response to being read the Riot Act that I've ever seen. Right? The guy got on a plane. He's like, man, nobody ever talked to me that way. Give me some more of that. Give me some more of that. We pitch him all this stuff. We teach him about it. You know, the guy's totally enthusiastic. He goes home. He goes on Amazon, eBay, and everywhere else. Buys all the shit that we told him to buy. And he saves himself $340. He did a good job. He did a good job. From one perspective, and that is the thrift perspective, right? Which is, I got all this stuff, and I saved $340. So he comes back to us. He comes back to us, and he says, dude, check it out. I got all this stuff. And I saved myself $340. He's proud. He's proud of himself. He doesn't understand that our response is not the same as his response. Right? Because we're like, fuck you, man. Fuck you. Now you want me to do this job? If I do this, I can't make any money. I can't put my kids through college. I can't buy shoes. Because in order to stay open, I need you to buy that from me, right? So we're mad. We're mad because we did all this work and the guy bought the stuff on Amazon. So so now we're kind of at odds, and this is a big problem. But it's a misunderstanding, because this guy thought when he came back that we were going to be proud of him for this accomplishment as well. So if we get over being emotional and both of us being disappointed, the customer's disappointed because we're not proud of him, we're disappointed because he misunderstood our whole proposition, right? Is that we're doing all this work to help him, and we're going to take care of him, we're going to do this awesome installation and whatever else, and in order to be able to do that, we needed to sell him the product. And now we're mad, and now he's mad because now everybody's mad. But now he wants us to do the job. And we're not very enthusiastic, right? And partly we're not enthusiastic because we kind of feel like we got the short end of the stick, man. He bought it all on Amazon. But we're also not enthusiastic because there are other customers. There are other customers that can help us keep the lights on, right? And so when the customer did that, and these are the guys that I'm talking to because they did this, I'm like, look, man, so there's a big misunderstanding here, and that is that you needed the tech. You needed the guy who was going to do your installation to be enthusiastic. And now he's not enthusiastic. So he's just, by human nature, not going to do you as right as he was going to do you before. And it's because he's disappointed. And it's also because this is a monetary thing. He's trying to stay in business. So this was a really expensive $340. Because he doesn't want to work on your car now. He may even tell you, dude, I can't do it. because I can only install the stuff that I sell. And there are good ways to explain this to a customer, and there are bad ways to explain this to a customer. Ideally, when we sell the system, we hint to him, or we write a ticket for him that makes this apparent, that this is our proposition, right? One of the ways that we can do that is by pricing things as a system. One of the ways that we can do that is by not providing prices for each of the products. One of the ways that we can do that is by not selling the product at all, right? Maybe we say, dude, we can make your car sound like this. It costs $8,000. He doesn't care what gear we're putting in. He's not going to go shop, right? There are all kinds of ways to do this, but we have to make this apparent. And we have to be able to anticipate that this customer may not understand our business proposal. Because when he shops at Amazon, it's not like this. When he goes to Best Buy, it's not like this. Best Buy will sell him a dryer out the door. You want us to install that? You don't want us to install that, do you?
Right.
Right.
We're trying to talk about it.
So this is not all that common, right? And sometimes labor for people is billed using leverage. And we don't like that. We don't like to be leveraged, right? We don't like it when our air conditioner goes out and we call the HVAC guy and it's 3 p.m. and it's 116 degrees outside, and the guy who answers the phone says, "How badly do you want your air conditioner to work?" Right? And we're like, "Fuck, man. Okay, so it's 3. It's like, so how much is a house call to fix the air conditioner?" Well, usually it's like $75 an hour, but it's 3 p.m. on a Friday, so it's going to be, man, my guys want to go home. If you want somebody out there now, it's going to cost you $450. We hate that. And that happens so often that customers often have they've got their defense shield up from the beginning, right? And they're trying to minimize the cost of labor because they don't understand the expertise. So sometimes we need to educate them, I guess, or we need to inform them about the difficulty and why expertise is required. And sometimes there are fast ways to do that. There are lots of different ways to convince somebody that expertise is required and that expertise is expensive. But we have to do that. So I have this conversation with customers a lot because there are a lot of customers who are disappointed by the work that they get. And in a lot of cases, it's because they've set themselves up for disappointment. The one that I get most often is, I bought all this gear. I have a buddy who used to be an installer who does some work in his own garage. He used to be a really good fabricator. So he did the A-pillars incorrectly. He did the A-pillars, and I have another guy who's an electrician, so he wired everything up and blah, blah, blah. And it's all cool, except I need somebody to tune it. I'm like, well, why'd you have all these dudes do this work? Oh man, so I went to this shop, and he'll rattle off the best shop in town, right? So he went there, somebody pitched him, he bought all the stuff online, he had it all installed or whatever, and he goes back to this shop and he wants it to be tuned. This is the call I get most often, right? I'm like, that guy is not going to tune your car. And he's the only guy in town who knows how to tune your car. He's not going to tune your car. He's not going to, and it's a big misunderstanding, right? I mean, he doesn't realize that tuning the car is the end of the rest of that whole process by which the retailer stays open and makes money. So these guys are often screwed in terms of trying to get somebody to tune their car because they want to buy everything in a deal. They don't trust anybody's expertise. They think everything is easy. You just put it in, it sounds good. What do you mean it doesn't sound good? Oh, we have to tune it. So the last resort, sometimes they're calling me as the last resort. Sometimes they're trying to find somebody. Sometimes they want me to tune it. Sometimes they want me to tune it remotely. And I'm like, dude, you kind of screwed yourself here, but you can probably learn to do this work. You can probably learn to tune this if you have enough time and you're willing to practice. So if I can't find somebody who will tune this car, and I don't even like to send these people to dealers because the dealer hates me, right? It's because you don't want this guy. You don't want this guy. So I sell him a mic kit, and sometimes I talk to him for 45 minutes about how to do this. And sometimes I talk to him for 45 minutes, and then I talk to him 2 or 3 more times for 10 minutes, and then they're kind of like happy. They feel like they're at least relieved, right? Okay, man, now it sounds good because it didn't sound good before. Now it sounds good. I don't know if it sounds great. I know that the guy is no longer dissatisfied and he's got a car full of my speakers. Not always. Sometimes he's got a car full of somebody else's speakers and he's just looking for help. And somebody told him, dude, call Andy. So if we're going to be responsible salespeople, then we have to make this whole proposition apparent to customers. So if you're a customer and you're looking for a store, think carefully about what you're looking for. Think carefully about what you're looking for, because there's a good chance, if you're really enthusiastic about this and you want something great and you're not going to get in the dude's way, you want to go to the highest end store in town. You want to go to the highest end store in town. So you may think, you may have designs on buying the best stereo system that this store has ever installed. That's probably not you, right? What you want is for the best, most expensive store in town to do something kind of middle of the road for them, for you, right? And it's worth paying. It's worth paying 30% more to have that dude who can build the space shuttle build you a Kia Optima.
Because at the end of the day, when you spend more, you're getting the better return on your investment based on the amount of money that you're spending with the quality of product that you're getting in return.
Right. If you want something that's reliable, that you can drive away and enjoy and whatever else, then you want the dude who can build the space shuttle operating at like 70%.
Yeah,
right?
On cruise control, not breaking a sweat.
You want him going, man, I've done this 10,000 times before. I know exactly what to do in a Ford F-150. This is what we do in a Ford F-150. Everybody loves it, and this is what we do. This is our bread and butter, right? That's what you want. Because if you go to the cheapest guy in town, who might be able to build you a 68 Beetle, and you ask him to make you a Kia Optima, you're not getting a Kia Optima. He'll charge you
You
for a
get the
Kia
68
Optima.
Beetle with Kia badges.
Right. So you want so you want to go to the best store in town. You want to go to the best store in town, and then you want to budget. You want to budget. You want to spend what you can afford, and you want those guys to give you the best thing that they can give you for the amount of money that you have.
Exactly. That's what Gary and I preach on this whole podcast. It's what we've preached since day one. You give the client the best return on their investment for the budget that they have, right? If they have $6,500, you're going to build the best thing for $6,500 that you can physically put together.
Right. And the other thing is, and this is primarily about selling DSP or about buying DSP, is that there's a lot of audio tomfoolery. I write about audio tomfoolery all the time. There's a lot of BS. There's a lot of features that don't have. I had a guy call me one day. He was mad as hell at a dealer because the dealer was trying to not sell him product X, but he wanted product X because product X would un-EQ his signal, and he needed un-EQ because that makes everything sound better, right? Mad as hell. He's never going back to this dealer. This dealer was one of my dealers, and whatever else. And madder than hell because this guy was trying to sell him another product that didn't have this un-EQ, and he needed un-EQ because un-EQ makes his car sound better. And I said, man, so we don't do business with dealers that are like that, right? I'm old. I'm not doing business with a bunch of shysters. I hate that. So these guys are probably not steering you wrong. In fact, the DSP they're trying to sell you is a better DSP in terms of being able to tune the car, and these guys are really good at tuning the car. What head unit are you using? Oh, I got a Pioneer DEX something. I'm like, dude, you don't even need an EQ. You don't need signal conditioning. I don't? No, you don't need signal conditioning. You're using an aftermarket radio. Your aftermarket radio is flat, 4 volt out, blah, 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 whatever. So the guy called him and apologized and bought the other DSP that they were trying to sell him. But so all this tomfoolery causes people to think that the DSP is something other than what it is. And what I always tell these guys is, look, unless you're going to tune this yourself, then you defer to the tech's suggestion about which DSP you need. Because the DSP, unless you're going to tune it yourself, the DSP is not your tool. The DSP is his tool, and he knows how to work it. And we're all better with tools that we know how to work. So when you show up with some DSP he's never seen, with a bunch of features that he's never used before, that you don't even need in this car, then you put yourself at a disadvantage because this guy is trying to steer you into stuff that he knows how to use to provide the best possible performance for the amount of money that he's going to charge you.
The analogy I gave Matt, I think on an earlier podcast, is painting a car. When you pick somebody to paint a car, you let them use the paint analogy that they're used to. And they know that system. They know that paint system. You pick the color, right? And they will use their product and get it to look as good as they can. And if you try to force them to use another product that they're not familiar with, your result's not going to be as good. Even if it is a slightly superior paint, the guy's better with what he knows.
Yes,
they know the limitations. They know the best that paint can turn out. They know how to mix it. They know when it's wrong by looking at it. I mean, there's so many variables here that we just learn over time with a certain product.
Tell them what you want. Tell them that you're going to hold them to it, but don't tell them how to do it. This is buying expertise, buying the benefit of expertise 101. Tell them what you want. Tell them you're going to hold them to it. Do not tell them how to do it. And this is a big problem, and especially with the enthusiast guys, because they'll come in with an expectation because they've read it all in the forums, and they know that if you want it to do this, then you have to do it this way. So they come in and they say, oh, I want, blah, 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 sound quality, SQ something. Okay, yeah, we can do that. It's actually pretty easy. What you're asking for is not rocket science, whatever. And I want all the speakers mounted in aluminum pods up above the dash and blah, 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 blah. And this one has to be pointed at this angle, and that one has to be pointed at that angle. And I want you to use this DSP, and you need 14 taps, and here's all the wires that you're going to use, and it has to be connected this way, and I want you to put the left and the right rear out of phase, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, dude, if I do that, you don't get what you came in here to get.
Exactly. You don't get my product. You don't
You
go
don't
to a fucking
get-
restaurant and tell the fucking cook how to make your steak. You get
You
what
don't-
comes out because that's their product.
You don't get the performance that you're asking for because your constraints prevent me from giving you that performance. Because you actually don't have any idea what you're talking about, and neither do the people on the forums that you've been talking to.
Yeah,
So-
they're listening to a PE teacher on the forums.
So I can give you the performance that you're asking for, or I can do it the way you want me to do it. And we sometimes aren't forthright with customers who do this to us. Sometimes we just go, oh my God, this is going to be a pain in the ass. And we take the keys, right? And we know at the beginning that this is not going to work. So this is not just a problem for us. This is also a problem for the customer. So that customer needs us to fight with him. That customer needs us to call him on this misunderstanding. That customer needs us to say, dude, I can give you what you want, or I can do it the way you want me to do it. You have to choose. But if I do it the way you want me to do it, it is not going to perform the way that you want it to perform. So you take your pick. Some of these guys may leave. Some of these guys may not have us do the system. But better to have the guy leave than to have the guy leave mad and to bash us all over the internet. This happens to me all the time. I'll have somebody call and they want to buy an AudioFrog product, but they wanted to do something else. They wanted to do something that is not designed to do. They wanted to perform in a way that's not designed to perform. And I'm like, man, as much as I would love to sell you a pair of $2,000 components, you're not going to like them. And while you may think that I'm just being like this really altruistic guy, this is a matter of enlightened self-interest. I don't want you to be disappointed. I don't want you to be disappointed with my product, because if you are, then you tell 5 people that you were disappointed. So here's what you should buy, right? Product X is exactly what you need. It's not an AudioFrog product, but it's exactly what you need. Go check that one out. Guess what that guy says? Online, and he didn't buy anything from me.
How often do you see people that have just blown their budget on stuff that's not going to make a difference? I see so many guys that will pick like a mid-grade speaker, and then they'll spend as much money on interconnects as they spend on speakers for the front of their system. And it drives me nuts sometimes when I see these guys just
Great product, no sound treatment.
Yeah, like misallocating budget and those sorts of things drives me wild.
Well, so I don't see a lot of that, right? Because I'm mostly answering either pre-purchase questions or post-purchase questions that mostly regard our speakers. I get a lot of questions about which amps are the best ones to use with AudioFrog speakers. And in reality, most of them.
Yeah, any amp that doesn't suck.
And there are a lot of those.
Yes.
Any amp that doesn't suck, and there are a lot of those. Which is the best DSP? The best DSP is the one that has the features that your installer needs in order to integrate it into your car. If you're doing the work, then it's the one with the features that you know how to use or can learn how to use. This is not what they want to hear. They want me to talk about Burr Brown D-Days and 192 kilohertz sample rates and all the shit that doesn't matter. All the stuff that absolutely doesn't matter because no human alive can hear any of it. And they're willing to step over all of the things that do really matter, right? Which is, can you even use this product? You're going to need to equalize the car. You're going to need to equalize the car. Do you know how to use a parametric EQ? No, I've never used a parametric EQ before. Well, so go read about it. Read about it. Here, go read this and call me back and tell me if you think you can do that. Because there are simpler ways, right? There are simpler ways to get close. If you think that you can do that, then this one is the right one. But if you're baffled by this and you don't have a lot of time, then that's not the right one. This other one is the right one. But in this whole product-centric sort of buying things, people get steered the wrong way all the time by stuff that doesn't matter. All the things that matter, they're not even considering because they're so fixated on a point source driver, which doesn't exist, by the way. It can't exist, by the way, unless you're going to drive it with. So a point source driver is a headphone. Point source driver is a headphone. And the only reason it works is because it's a half an inch from your ear. But move it 10 feet away, it doesn't work anymore.
In what way are you saying it doesn't work?
Well, because the compromises that are required in order to have a point source driver make the rest of the performance impossible, right? Intermodulation distortion, Doppler distortion, because in order to make bass, that tiny little speaker would have to move 3 feet, right? All kinds of reasons that a point source driver cannot, in fact, exist.
Are you saying to play full range?
Yeah.
Okay.
But a point source driver, by definition, would have to play full range.
I'm saying concentric driver is what I'm hearing when you say point source.
Yeah, but concentric, but a concentric driver doesn't necessarily perform like a point source driver. This is the big misunderstanding. The fact that the tweeter is in the middle of the cone doesn't make it a point source driver. It can be concentric and still suck.
True.
It can be concentric and still suck. And this notion that the acoustic centers have to be perfectly aligned between a mid-range and a tweeter is also garbage. And it's even worse in a car because we move our heads and the speakers are really close and we move our heads. So when I see people, and this is one of the big forum things, right? Which is, we have to precisely match the phase of the tweeter with the phase of the mid-range. And I'm like, for what point in space are you going to do this? And how do you know that tiny ass point in space is representative of where your ears are?
And can I help you, both of you, because Matt's throwing his hands up in the air right there, because we've had this conversation before, that when you talk about the differences between a car that somebody competes with, right, where they're literally using lasers to put someone's head in the position for the car to be judged, right? And those are the difference. Yeah, you're going down the road, driving around, looking at it.
This is where I wish we had a video podcast.
Yeah, video would be good. But that's where those notions come from, is when somebody sits in one of those cars where that is the thing, and they literally will put you into the position and say, close your eyes, don't move your head, don't breathe, don't fart. And yes, that stuff matters. And you know it matters.
It doesn't. It does
not. No. So there's
the path length of the frequency of a tweeter is less than our human ears.
But it's not just that. It's not just that. It's that when we set these delays with this ultimate precision, we're at high frequencies, we're setting them for this one tiny point. And when we move the microphone an inch, and these figures are no longer in phase, right? So where do we go?
It's not just that. It's not just up at 5,000 hertz.
So this is precisely what I was talking about 3 hours ago, and that is that this notion that additional performance always attends additional precision is crap.
Well,
it's crap. It's not. There's a point at which it doesn't matter. There's a point at which it doesn't matter.
Yes.
And it does. That's not to say that doing a good job doesn't matter. That is to say that understanding the job matters, and that efficiency. So this is the difference between doing this job professionally and doing this job as a hobbyist. Because the hobbyist's objective is to do this job, right? I bought a 74 Triumph TR6 so that I could do a job, right? And doing the job is the joy. I hate driving old cars. I hate it, right? So I like it once in a while. Like, I'll drive this thing to eat dim sum one Sunday morning, once a month or whatever. Maybe one morning I'll get up and I'll drive it to work, right? But it's a pleasurable thing every once in a while for me, but it's a pain, man. There is no comparison between driving a 74 Triumph TR6 and the comfort of driving my nerd wagon to work, right? So I didn't buy this car so that I could finish it in a week and drive it around. I bought this car so that for weekends for the next 7 years, I have shit to do. I love old cars because there's a nostalgia. There's this sort of time capsule sort of a thing with old cars. I love to look at them and I love to tinker with them. But I bought them because I needed a job to do. I needed something to do. So the nature of a hobby is to have an unending product or an unending project. So the hobbyist can spend every weekend from now until he dies avoiding his wife in the garage tuning his car. And for that guy, the quest for the ultimate precision has no bearing on reality whatsoever, because his reality is continuing to do this job forever. But if we need to deliver a car, and we're a professional, then we need to understand clearly the point at which additional precision has no bearing on
you got to
performance.
understand the science
Yes.
and physics.
So the problem is that you're qualifying that in two different directions. You're saying, okay, under this small set of this big set of circumstances, which is normal, everyday car audio as a business, delivering cars that sound good to customers, right? And then saying that affects has no bearing, that there is nothing better, right? That any additional work is bullshit and not worth it is not fair.
Yes, it
is.
is.
The same way. No, hold on. In the same way that you roll your nerd wagon into the Volvo dealer, right? And they give it a tune-up and it runs just fine, right? And what did I send you this week? A Volvo wagon that runs 7-second quarter miles, right? The dealer didn't do that. It's not in the dealer's scope of work, right? But it doesn't mean it's impossible. It doesn't mean that you can't get an engine to run better. It doesn't mean that there isn't something beyond that. So for you to blatantly say there is nothing better, I get it this is an established set of parameters that gets us to a point. But to outright say that none of this matters or gets any better, where's the race car side of it? Where's the it could go better?
The race car is not the nerd wagon. The race car is a different objective completely, right? So you're saying that I'm saying that in terms of audio performance, and you can wrap that in whatever you want, right? So if we're talking about a 1-seat system, we could be talking about a 7-seat system in a nerd wagon where every seat sounds great. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
But let's just say at this point that we're talking about, because we brought it up before, the competition dude, right? We're talking about the competition dude. So the competition thing is primarily a 1-seat. This is building the best 2-channel system possible in a car, right?
Okay.
This is pick your home audio speakers. I don't care. Martin Logan's, JBL's, whatever. This is getting that sound in a car, right? So we've constrained the performance, right? So we're saying that there is a pinnacle of audio performance that can be achieved. And I'm saying that there is a point at which additional precision does not make that audio performance any better, right? So you could apply that same thing to this Volvo wagon, right? And that is to say that there will come a point in even the race car thing at which additional work will not make that car go faster. I don't know where that point is, but there is a point in everything, right? So
Right.
one of wait, let me finish because
Okay.
there's one more point I want to make, and that is that we do this instinctively. And I was accused by the world's worst car audio competitor ever in the history of the world as being a sellout, as being a sellout. And I'm a sellout because I do this commercially. And that because I say, because I'm willing to do this for money, means that I'm going to make some kind of half-assed bullshit fucking compromise. And that any admission that there's nothing higher is a sellout, is to not understand the difference between the hobby and the commercial reality, right? So I'm not saying that there's no benefit whatsoever in any way, shape, or form in additional precision. And this is the example of my triumph, right? For the hobbyist, additional precision is the end in itself, right? What he wants to do every weekend is search. The search may come up with nothing, but he wants to continue searching. It is not a sellout for somebody who knows how this shit works to say, you're not going to find anything else.
So two things. I get that. That's a better qualification of what you were saying. But the guy searching at home is going to develop his skills. He's going to develop his ability to listen, his ability to tune, and to salt and pepper it to his taste, and to get things dialed. The precision in as far as treatments in the car and speaker placement, and there's a lot of work that goes into some cars, a lot more work than we would ever do as a retailer, right? And I feel that we owe those people that put that work in and do some really amazing things some props, and that there are some amazing sounding cars out there. There's also some terrible sounding cars that show up to car audio contests. I'm sure you've been there. But that's where those lines get blurred between the guys that compete and spend a bunch of time, or something somebody heard and had a memory of how good a certain car sounded, and then try to bring that into a car that they're going to commute in, right? Not a purpose built. I was surprised the last contest I went to how many guys had non-daily drivers as sound quality competition cars.
Sure.
Still, like, I mean, that was a thing back in the day, but
Right.
like, for that to happen now seems odd. But I feel like there's a step above what the expectation of just going into a shop and having an install done in a week or two. Obviously, Matt does some.
I'm not
stuff
disputing that.
Takes. Okay,
I'm
that's what it feels like you're disputing.
Of course, because all three of us are not only professionals, but we've also spent some time as hobbyists, right? And It's a big jump. It's a big jump to say that nobody wants to be accused of jerking off. Right? Nobody wants to be accused of this. What I'm saying is that of course, Lisa and I were driving down the street the other day, and there's a lowrider in front of us. And this is not an attractive thing to me. I have no interest in lowriders I have no interest in lowriders, right? But I can also appreciate the amount of work that goes in to a serious lowrider. And when I used to install in El Paso, a lot of these dudes were my customers. These guys had so much money in these cars, and I would look at this car and I'm like, this does not at all appeal to me. But fuck if the paint isn't beautiful.
Right.
Right? So but that's not this exercise. That's not this exercise. So I have to fight this a lot. Because of this thing that I wrote, right? Because of this thing that I wrote. And when we are, this is something else I was thinking about while I was making this pizza earlier. So we have a tendency.
You're making me want pizza, Andy. Come on.
So we have this tendency. This all sort of goes back to this whole complicated world thing, right? But we have a tendency to, when things affect us emotionally, we have a tendency to romanticize what it is that goes into this thing that affects us emotionally. So audio systems are a vehicle for us to listen to music, right? Some of us are musicians, some of us are not musicians. Some of us, the only musical instrument that we play is a stereo, right? We love music, and music for non-musicians is an emotional thing, right? That's why we listen to it. It's an emotional thing. Music for musicians is also an emotional thing, but it's also a very technical thing, right? It's a super technical thing. And talk to a serious jazz musician, and he'll start talking tech that you don't even know. You didn't even know this was a thing, man. And this is what he's mired in, right? He's mired in this amount of technical detail that we didn't even know existed. The same thing goes for a chef, right? So those of us who were techs or we install or whatever, we're kind of like chefs, right? We create this thing and we open the trunk, and sometimes it takes us like 6 hours of standing there scratching our heads to figure out what we're going to do. Sometimes we open a trunk and we're like, oh, I know exactly where this stuff goes. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to look like this. It's going to look like that, and whatever else, right? So we're kind of like chefs, right? We're kind of like chefs, but talk to a chef. If you're into food sometimes, but you don't really know anything about a restaurant, we think that the job of a chef is like ratatouille, right? And all the chef does is like gets to like mess around with saffron and shit. And then at some point that he comes up with by sheer magic and divine inspiration, he comes up with this combination of flavors that is so perfect and whatever, and the reviewer comes and he writes this glowing, flowery prose about all this stuff. But that's not the job of a chef. You know what the job of a chef is? He gets to do that sometimes. The job of a chef is managing people in a kitchen, right? The job of a chef is getting a bunch of people without his expertise to deliver on his expertise. Right? So we have a tendency to romanticize these kinds of things, and we do it more when it's something that we're emotionally involved in and when it's something we don't understand. Right? So I think that what we're wrestling with here, with this notion of additional precision providing additional performance, is this romantic notion of continually ascending this ladder of competence to this point at which all of the speakers disappear and everything opens up into this wild thing that we've never heard before. And we read about this on the forums where people have this experience, and I'm like, I kind of have that experience every time I tune a car, right? So we don't really know somebody's perspective.
Here's the big disconnect, right? So this is where I'm blending Gary and Andy together, right? So Andy, your procedure is basically stating that if you do these series of events perfectly to the point where what I'm saying here, you're understanding, you're comprehending what I'm saying, and you're executing it perfectly, you are always going to exceed the customer's expectations. No questions asked. It's going to always do what I say it's going to do. That is 100% truth. But then it comes down to a reference point like Gary or me or somebody else to where we're going to know the limitations of the equipment that we're installing. And there's many times that I put something in and I know if something is right or if it's wrong or if it could get better. And because I have that reference point, I know that there's something that I have missed and something that is wrong within this to reevaluate that check sheet, that checklist of events to see where something went wrong.
Yeah, it's troubleshooting. We have to troubleshoot.
Yeah, of course. But when we have techs who think they follow your checklist perfectly, I'm going to go back to my example of a tech where they tuned the car and I went in the car and I'm like, your mid bass is out of phase. I can tell just like that. That comes down to reference. But they follow the guideline to what they perceive as perfectly. But the reference point is a difference maker there to understand if more can be gained from the system or if they're at an acceptable stopping point to where this is pretty much what you can expect as the maximum performance of the system. And any additional time you're going to spend on this is primarily a waste of time.
I think that the
think
part that Andy and I are disconnecting from is different, though. I think what I'm seeing is there's a guy sitting at home watching John Force run a quarter mile, right? And then expects to go out to his garage to his Acura Integra and bolt a header on. And he's like, well, this header worked good for John Force. It should make my car faster.
There's plenty of marketing that causes them to believe that.
Yeah, and it's two different things, although John Force's car is really fast,
yes.
Right? Right? And that Integra is never quite going to get there, right? But I think that people see that elusive goal of something amazing, right? Something that they've, like you explained it, Andy, never heard before, and the dash opens up and the stage goes 6 feet out in front of the hood, and whatever.
And when I hear somebody say that, I'm like, oh yeah, you finally got to the point where it's pretty close to correct, because that's what happens. But they've never heard that before, so it's this
exactly, and that's my point. Is the reference point of consumers and customers is so small that you only have to get 75% of right, and it's going to be something that they've never experienced, which is also making it a lot harder for the uneducated installers and people that know how to tune a car, because cars are coming more with that soundstage that is unlike anything they've ever heard before.
Right. Yeah. Right. You get it basically from the factory. In some cars, you get it from the factory, but it doesn't play loud enough. Right. So what's our job, right? To preserve some of that and to make it sound louder if the customer likes that. So back to this point that you were making, Matt, about this process and about this reference point. So what you're describing is a process of troubleshooting. And I get these calls a lot, right? Which is, man, I did your process and it didn't work. And I say, okay, I know the process works because I've used it for 35 years. I've taught hundreds of people to use this process. And a lot of those people who did other processes before, after learning this process and practicing it a few times, have said, oh my God, I have never heard a car that sounded this good. I have, during AudioFrog U, taught people who have heard hundreds and hundreds of cars this process. And they insist that it takes 10 hours to tune a car. We're done in an hour and 20 minutes, and they get in and they say, holy fuck, I never heard a car that sounds this good, right? So I know the process works. So please describe for me what you did, because something's wrong, right? Because something's wrong. You're not wrong. You're not an idiot, right? Something isn't right? A speaker's out of phase. There's a big peak at 1K in one channel and it's not in the other channel. We need to find out what that is so that you can go back and correct it. So I'm going to try to help you troubleshoot over the phone. So describe the process. What did you do first? I did this. Okay. So what did you do next? Well, I did this. What did you do after that? Well, I kind of did this because somebody told me that you didn't follow the process. Yeah, I did. No, you didn't. Because the process doesn't include that. And when you do that, you invalidate a whole bunch of other steps later in the process, right? If you put the front left mid-bass driver out of phase because you read somewhere on the forum that somebody told you to do that, and then you set delays, this just doesn't work. So you can choose one or you can choose the other, but you can't do both. You can't do both. Oh, the tape measure doesn't work. No, the tape measure always works. The tape measure measures distance perfectly. The tape measure measures distance perfectly. So if you measured the distance and you entered the delays correctly, right? Sometimes we need to enter the delay, and sometimes we need to enter the delay as distance, and sometimes we need to enter the distance from the speaker to the speaker. Which DSP are you using? I'm using this one. Oh, with that one, you have to enter the delays. Did you measure from all the speakers and subtract the, blah, 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 blah. Oh, no, I didn't do that. Okay, that's the problem. So if you go back and you do that differently, then it'll work, right? So this is all of this troubleshooting. But what I find most often is that people insert other things into the process that screw up other stuff. And they don't realize that it's going to screw up other stuff because they haven't done this process before. So what I always tell people is, look, there are a whole bunch of different ways to do this. And there are lots of processes. Some of them are better than others, And so better can mean a lot of things. But the first notion of better is when we get to the end of the process, does it sound correct? Right? If it doesn't sound correct, then we got a process that doesn't really work, right? So if both processes can get us all the way to correct, then there are other things about the process that matter, right? One of them is, for me, it's can I teach it? Can I teach it? Other qualifications for other differences between processes are which one is faster? If they both wind up in the same place, then for me, the one that I can teach to anybody is the better one. Because that's kind of my job, is to help people be able to do this work, right? So if you own a store and there are two processes that get you to the same point, and one of them takes an hour, one of them takes 16 hours, and you're booked out 6 weeks, which is the better process? The faster one. If you're trying to teach people, then the better process is the one that's straightforward and can be taught, right? But if they all get to the same place, then they all work. But they're not all interchangeable. And this is one of the biggest problems. And what we think sometimes, and I've heard this from a lot of dealers, is that they're not willing to sort, right? They have loyalties. They're loyal to Andy, and they're loyal to Nick, and they're loyal to the other Nick, and they're loyal to Doug Dobson, they're loyal to MSC, and they're loyal to these guys, and whatever. And since they're loyal to everybody, their process becomes an amalgam of a whole bunch of processes, which is not a process, right? So I'm not offended if you don't use my process. I hope that you'll find one that works and that makes sense for you. But choose one. And if you don't know anything about this, it's really important that you choose one and that you learn it. But we don't learn something by reading a document, trying it once. We don't learn something by watching a YouTube video and trying it once. We don't learn something from reading a book unless we already know so much about it that reading a book just provides us additional information. So tuning, learning to do anything is practice, right? So you find a way, you find a process. You can use David Smyer's process. You can use Gary Bell's process. You can use Brian Schmidt's process. You can use Kranz's process for fabricating. You could use any of these processes, but you got to choose one and learn it, because while you're learning that one, you will learn why this works, and then you'll be able to make better decisions about subbing in other parts of the process or coming up with your own process. But ignorance is not a process, and jumbling up shit because we're loyal. Oh man, I just put everything in one big bucket and I pull it out, right? Because I love Andy and I love Nick and I love Sage and I love whoever else. So everybody's really taught me a lot. So I do this and then I do that and something else and whatever else, blah, blah, blah. And then Andy showed up and he listened to my car and he said it didn't sound very good. Right? And then he asked me what process I used. And I said, well, I did this and this and this and this and that. And then he told me that's why it didn't sound good. But I get a lot of calls. Just today, just before we started this thing, I got a Facebook message from a competitor guy who's trying really hard. He's trying really hard to compete. He's trying really hard to build a better sounding car. And he goes to a competition and he gets his score sheet back and they tell him that there wasn't enough stage depth, or they tell him that this, or they tell him that, and somebody told him that this is how you time align the sub and whatever else. And he tries it, doesn't work. It kind of worked, but it didn't work all the way, right? It didn't work all the way. And sometimes these kinds of suggestions are, oh, well, if you want the stage depth to be better, then you need to play with your delays. And I am not ever going to concede that playing with the delays is the path to ascendancy. This is not how we get to a Volvo wagon that does a mile in 2 seconds. By fucking with shit, playing with stuff, messing around. No. Maybe, but what are the chances? That you're gonna dig around with shit and then all of a sudden you're gonna do something better than a dude with a PhD, a dude who's devoted his life his entire life to understanding this one very specific thing and developing this one tiny little piece of expertise that nobody else in the world has. And you're going to fuck around your way past that guy? No, never. I'll fight. I'll yell and scream, and my voice will get squeaky and whatever else, but I am not going to concede that process. I'm not going to concede that the process of messing around and playing around eternally is going to supersede devotion and learning and applying oneself to understand what can be understood. So when I say that there comes a point at which no more dicking around is going to provide additional performance, that's what I mean. I mean, this is audio, man. These are speakers. These are tape measures. This is actually really simple. Once you learn how to do it, this is simple. People don't like it when I say that this is simple because they want to. When I used to show up on SSQ, and there would be this long thing. This, it's like 926 responses to some technical question, and I show up and I go, dude, here's how that works. These guys fucking hate that because I destroyed it. Right? So they'll argue with me that this isn't how it works. But what they're really trying to do is to preserve the exercise. So I leave, I go away. I don't belong there because they're doing something different. And when I say, dude, measure with the tape measure, because you can measure impulse responses, but they're so difficult to accurately analyze that in reality, you're not going to get any closer to the tape measure. They don't want to hear that. Because we're in love with this notion of additional complexity being attached to additional precision, and additional precision being attached to additional performance. We do this with all kinds of stuff, right? So a DSP that's made in China and a DSP that's made in Germany can't be the same because German engineers are more persnickety, right? This is preposterous, right? So under certain circumstances, that persnicketiness might matter, but if both are built to spec, the persnicketiness doesn't matter, right? But we insert all kinds of weird stuff in there to protect ourselves. It's what people do. So
to kind of stay on topic, but not to get too off topic.
Good luck.
Wait, there was a topic here?
Yeah. I
thought we went full rant. I don't know.
It is almost 2 a.m. here, but
oh gosh,
I'm just curious of what your answer is. So it may piggyback onto what you just said, right? About the additional things and perceiving different things differently with delays and such. How does Andy Wehmeyer tune your rear speakers?
Oh, well, this depends.
And what is the purpose that you perceive the rear speakers, and how with your tuning method is that impacting the front speakers?
So this depends.
Because I feel like this might go against what you just said. So
if I have all the tools that I want, then I have an upmixer that sorts out what happens in the rear. So to me, the rear speakers are there to provide a sense of envelopment, a sense of space, a sense that we're in a room where something is happening rather than watching what's happening in a room through a window, which is kind of what I hear when I hear the front stage only thing. I've been listening to multi-channel for so long that 2-channel really kind of falls flat for me. Mm-hmm. And at home, I have a system that I can do multi-channel or 2-channel or or whatever else. And I have quite an audio system at home. I mean, it's all built with JBL studio monitors, and it's great. And it can do multi-channel and it can do 2-channel and whatever else. So to me, the rear speakers are there to provide a sense of envelopment or a sense of space or a sense of ambience. Call it whatever you want, but it's really to provide some 3-dimensional aspect to what I kind of hear in two channel, which is, depending on the recording, primarily a kind of a two-dimensional thing. There's width, there's width, and there's some depth, and whatever else. But rear speakers can really add a sense of the rest of the space, space. So that's what it's for. So in all cases, there are great tools, right? There are tools that allow us to do a better job of approximating that. So if we're talking about rear speakers, and I don't really like the word accuracy when we're talking about audio, because it's kind of hard to understand, right? So there's accuracy, and that is we want to reproduce exactly what's on the disc, right? But the disc was really kind of an exercise in trying to reproduce exactly what happened, right? If it was a live performance. And in a studio recording, the disc is really kind of an exercise in providing a deep fake of what might have happened, right? So I really prefer the word believability. I really prefer the word believability. So to me, the whole idea of rear speakers is to enhance believability. Is to enhance believability when we listen to a piece of music in a car, and in a very specific way, and that is believability in terms of the space in which we're sitting and how much it suggests to us an original space. Because in a car, we're just not going to be able to reproduce the original space. The car is not going to sound like the Rose Bowl. It's just not. It can't. There's too much acoustic crosstalk. There are too many reflections. We're always going to know we're in a car, but we can be reminded, or we can accede to a suggestion that the original space was larger than this, right? We can get a sense that it was larger.
Right. And that goes to your two-channel argument saying that it sounds flat, is when you add the rear speakers, and you add the sense of space, it's going to a lot of times push the front further out and make the space seem way bigger in a car standpoint.
Yeah. Yes, it adds a sort of a three-dimensional sense of space. And so with some recordings, it can sound like it adds depth to the stage in the front of the car.
Pushes the front forward.
Yeah, I think that kind of depends on the recording. So depending on the tools I have, the method is very different. So if I've got an up mixer, and it can be our up mixer, which someday will see the light of day.
Give me both scenarios: up mixer and then two channels.
So up mixer, there are all different kinds of up mixers. So let's just not talk about up mixer. Let's say that if I have an up mixer, then I'm going to use whatever tools the up mixer has to provide what I think is the most believable sense of space. And what I should qualify that by saying that for me, the most interesting, I can forgive all kinds of frequency response problems, like peaky mid-range, or the mid-bass is a little thick. That's really my pet peeve. But for me, what's most interesting, and one of the reasons I love to go to live shows, is because I like the sense of space. So I'll always trade a wide stage for a deep stage, or a wide stage for a stage that's far away. Width to me is the most interesting, followed by this sense of ambience and space and whatever else. So if I have a two-channel system, I used to think that this whole differential rear fill, left minus right, and all that kind of stuff was really kind of how you had to do it. And I used to suggest doing it that way, and I've drawn diagrams for people. And I used to do this years ago when I was in retail, because this originally started out as a thing called Dynaquad, right? So you can Google that. I'm not going to talk for 45 minutes about Dynaquad, but this idea of differential rear fill, where you take out the center information, and then the back is kind of decorrelated, or at least there's no center information in the back and whatever else. I used to do that, but I don't like it. And I never really liked it. So in a two-channel system, I used to suggest this differential left minus right thing, but I don't like it. So it always seemed to have problems for me, and it was really hard to tune because it would change the frequency response, and it sometimes sounded nasal and honky and just phasey and weird, and I don't think that any of that's necessary. So what I do now, it's a lot easier. I think it sounds way better, is that I turn the rear speakers up. I don't cross them over at 100 hertz. You don't want to make a bunch of mid bass, because that sometimes affects the illusion of bass in the front of the car. So cross them over at 100 or 200 or somewhere like that, and then turn them up until sitting in the driver's seat you hear them. distinctly, right? I hear the rear speakers, and then I delay them until I don't hear them distinctly anymore. That usually winds up being somewhere like, depending on the size of the
8 to
car and
9
where they're,
milliseconds.
yeah, 8 to 12 or so. In small cars, it
Yeah,
might be
I do the
more.
exact same thing.
And so not putting them out of phase really sort of makes the whole frequency response thing sound a lot more pleasant. But the idea of the delay is you don't want them to sound like an echo. You just want them to kind of disappear.
You want them to sound like a natural reflection of the front, which
Yeah,
a lot of the
so
times it sounds like that.
when I hear an echo, then I don't really then I don't like it anymore. What
Right.
I want is to when I'm sitting in the driver's seat, I want to hear additional space, but I don't want to identify the rear speakers as the source of the sound of that additional space.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that's a matter of fiddling a bit with delay and level, right? If the speaker's really close, like if it's a little hatchback or a sports car or something, and the speaker is right behind your head, sometimes the fact that the left speaker is so close to your head and the right speaker is farther away makes it so that you hear that one that's closer, and sometimes it's a different combination of level and delay depending on how close the speaker is to your head. But that's what I do now, and I think it sounds much better. I think it's a lot easier. I think it's easier for other people to implement. I can teach it, and it doesn't cause a bunch of frequency response weirdness.
Right.
So in an upmix system, especially with our upmixer, Logic 7, Pro Logic 2, and DTS Neural don't really provide this, but in our upmixer, if you do a 7.1, then you can use those side speakers with a very specific amount of delay and one of the controls to add believable width to the front speakers, like play Yellow the race, and shit happens most definitely outside of the car. This is something that I get this question from competitors all the time. Man, how do I make it wider? How do I make it wider? It's like, well, if you got two speakers in the front, it can't be any more left than left. And it can't be any more right than right. And if you don't believe me, then move your balance control all the way to the right. Right? Because when something is only recorded in the right, that's as far right as it can be. And when something is recorded only in the right, then it only plays in the right speaker. And that means that it's going to come from the right speaker. So if you're sitting in the driver's seat, then you may hear things behind the right speaker, right? If you draw a line from your nose through the right speaker, you may hear stuff behind there, but you won't hear anything outside of that triangle that is your nose through each of the two front speakers. But with an upmix system and some processing, then there's other stuff we can do to create an illusion of better width and additional ambience and all kinds of stuff. So that's what I do.
The reason that I asked that question, I almost knew to a T that you did the rears the same way I do my rears, because my procedure's been kind of a melting pot of a lot of things, of trial and error from a bunch of different people over the years, and I've found what would be like my way how to do stuff that I feel like I've tried and it works. And the rears, I know that you do the rears the same way that I do the rears, or I do the rears the same way you do the rears, which is why I asked the question, because that is the type of, I think, salt and pepper stuff that is enhancing the overall imaging or the soundstage, whatever you want to call it, to the overall product that we're delivering to the client.
Sure.
That isn't in a generic procedure, right? And I think that's what Gary's alluding to. And then what you were alluding to was, if you just do the basic procedure, it's already going to be leaps and bounds beyond better what the client was expecting. So there is room there, that there are additional things there which you can enhance your overall product with certain little known procedures like what we just described.
Yeah, like adding rear speakers. So that little thing I wrote is for tuning a 2-channel system, right? It doesn't include upmixers, right? I've been working on an upmixer and a DSP for 6 freaking years. So I'm not saying that 2-channel system is the best system that can be built. because I don't think it is. I think that an upmix system is way better than a 2-channel system. I wrote that document because there are a lot of people who don't know how to tune a 2-channel system. This is the beginning. This is the beginning. What I'm saying when I'm saying that all of this additional precision and whatever else doesn't necessarily add additional performance, I'm saying that in that 2-channel system, that laser aligning the tweeters and laser aligning the mids
Correct.
and all that kind of
100%,
stuff,
yeah,
that doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Adding an
nonsense.
upmixer, fuck yeah, that matters. Adding rear speakers, hell yeah, that makes a difference, right? That makes a difference. But those other the lasers and the ultra precise phase measurements between the tweeter and the mid range, or getting
and I would have to assume the laser stuff that you at least from my point of view becomes more for symmetry as you're creating the product,
make it
right?
Yes, make it look
perfectly perfectly equal, right?
Yes.
It has nothing to do with like aiming the driver. It has everything to do with perfect symmetry,
making the shapes right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yes, of course.
So this was fun. I mean, we're almost 4 hours in. Definitely our longest podcast. I assumed it would be our longest podcast because there's so much to talk about. I almost wish we started this at 1 p.m. during the day so we could talk for.
I'd be dead by. So my father used to say. So when I was a little kid, I was a kind of a precocious little kid. I used to go to work with my grandmother. Sometimes she worked in a bank, and I would like walk around and sit on people's desks and talk to them when I was like 3 or 4. Or my father used to tell people like a third of the way through something like this, a conversation with me, he would like walk by and he'd say, "Ask for a quarter, get $1."
Always get more than we ask for.
Yeah, but most of it's probably not useful anyway. So we'll see. So you'll get 15 minutes. You'll get 15 minutes out of this. It'll be the shortest podcast you've ever broadcast.
It'll be every bit of 4 hours.
Yeah, Matt does the editing, right? And this will end up being 4 hours long and all in one shot. Not going to break it up. Not going to do anything.
And this definitely isn't a one and done. You're going to be on many times because there's so many different scenarios in which I would love to just go back and forth and debate and get each side because I think it's fun. And I love talking to educated people because you get educated conversation.
I don't have an education, man.
Yeah, School of Hard Knocks.
I got a lot of experience. I got a lot of experience in listening, but I don't have much of an education.
Hey, Andy, you know what my dad taught me? It said definition of experience is knowledge acquired from fucking stuff up, and boy, do I have a lot of experience.
Yeah, it's officially 2 a.m.
Yeah, Matt needs to go to bed.
Yeah,
I think we're calling this. I think we're calling this as a timeout, like a time limit. We've reached the end of the game.
Yeah, I don't have. There's nothing left in me, man.
Oh, come on!
It's all over. It's all over for tonight. But yeah, I mean, I'll do this again. We have to make sure that we don't like rehash the same thing because you'll get me wound up. I'll do it. I'll rehash the same thing.
Yeah, there's plenty of other topics.
All good. Matt, we'll skip demo tracks. I took some notes of songs that Andy mentioned, so I'm just using those for our
demo tracks. Give me one of your, and again, it's so loaded because there's so many demo tracks that you use for different scenarios and what you're looking for. But if you're getting in a car tomorrow, because you're tired right now, and it's something that you are told is spectacular, what's the first 1 or 2 tracks that you're going to on your phone and playing?
So it's so late I can't remember. Hang on just a second. So Sly, which is a Herbie Hancock song, which is on Headhunters. Rocket, Believe It or Not, if you can. I mean, I'm old enough that this was like on MTV every 12 minutes, and it was an abbreviated version. But if you can make it all the way through Rocket, which is another Herbie Hancock track, which is on Future Shock or Future to Future, that's another really, really excellent one. But you'll have to be patient because you'll have to get used to the fact that it's recorded without a shitload of bass. But man, 2/3 of the way through, that's really unbelievable.
And the first track that you said, what's the big allure with that track that you like? What is it about it?
In terms of the audiophileness of the track, I don't know. It's one that always draws me in, and it draws me in because there is an enormous amount of stuff all going on at the same time. Mm-hmm. And the recording is excellent, so it's really easy to become really focused on one super repetitive part of this sort of groove that develops about halfway through the track. For mid bass, check out Blast by Marcus Miller, which is on a live album called A Night in Monte Carlo. Another favorite for me is Ancient Highway by Van Morrison.
That's a good list, by the way. That's more than we usually do. So
man, there are so
another thing I wanted to ask.
So many that I ask me next time. I'll give you 5 other ones. I don't know.
Another thing I wanted to ask. Earlier in the episode, you said you've seen so many live performances, different places, different venues. What's the best acoustically sounding venue you've been to?
Oh, well, I don't know if it's so much the venue. We went to see Ray LaMontagne at Town Hall in Manhattan one night when I lived in New York. And that's the hi-fiest thing I've ever heard. And that, I mean, this was a live show that was high-fire than even the hi-fiest hi-fi I've ever heard at a hi-fi show. It was nuts. So he starts playing, and I'm like, holy shit. I never heard anything like this. So I break out my phone, and it's annoying Lisa because it's bright and whatever else. And I'm like, I'll stop. Just give me a second. So I'm looking because I can't tell because line arrays all look the same now, except they look like JBL Vertec line arrays, which have this sort of a horn-loaded thing in the middle. I was pretty sure it was Vertec. So I'm looking up the venue to try to figure out what the audio system is. Well, it turns out it's all a bunch of Lake processors, and I can't remember what amplifiers it was, but it was a whole big ass Vertec house system. And I'm sitting there in the venue, and Doug Button, who at the time was the head engineer at JBL Pro and whatever, he also worked in the office in Northridge. So I send Doug Button an email from Town Hall in the middle of this concert. I'm like, hey, dude, man, so I'm at Town Hall in New York listening to Ray LaMontagne and your speakers, because he had, I guess in his team, Alex Boschvio and a bunch of other people. I said, man, you and your team have like totally outdone yourselves because this is a big Vertec line array, and I have literally never heard anything so good as this. Tell them all congratulations for me, right? But that's the hi-fiest thing I've ever heard live.
Wow. Awesome.
Fun learning the history. I don't know if I've ever learned the full history of yourself, so that was fun for me.
I gave it to you at the beginning of this, which is sucked, got hired, sucked less, became good, got a job, was really lucky, quit that job, does this job.
That's what life is all about, is finding your passion, failing and learning.
Less suck.
To become better.
Yes. Sucking at the beginning and then sucking less. Yeah. But still sucking, because if you're not continually sucking, that means that you're not learning anything. Right? So you gotta keep pushing yourself into spots where you're not comfortable.
Yep. 100%.
Matt says that all the time.
Yep.
Constantly telling us how bad his cars used to sound. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, so bad. In hindsight, when you look at this, when I feel like the stuff that I built 5 years ago and the stuff that I tuned 5 years ago, I should be embarrassed.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's how you should feel, and that's okay. You should.
And if you didn't feel that way, you wouldn't have grown, and that would have been way worse.
Because you have better processes, and 5 years from now, I'll look back at the stuff that I'm doing right now, and I'll be like, Jesus Christ, I could have done it so much better.
Like, we used to only put 8 speakers in a car.
Yeah.
All right. It is really, really late, so we will wrap it up. Yep. Andy, thank you.
Sure, we can do this again, and
yeah, I'm sure we
find
will.
Some other crazy shit.
I feel like I could have just segued that last conversation into a whole new topic.
Yeah,
I stopped myself.
I think, Matt, we might actually have to script ourselves, and then we'll just have Andy on once every X number of episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that.
Cool. Well, we appreciate it.
So next time, I totally understand the format, right? Which is kind of free form, it goes where it goes and whatever else. But if we do a free form goes where it goes without any direction again, it'll go where this one went, because that's where it'll go.
But
I love that because that's the most organic conversation.
It'll just get right back where we were, though.
Right, but you'll get my fucking rant about complexity, and you'll it'll be the same rant. So next time, since we've done the freeform thing, next time
we got the background,
next time
go into specific avenues.
Pick a topic. Pick a topic.
We'll start a new segment, and it'll be like shit that tilts Andy. And we'll just come up with things that you deal with that just fucking aggravates you.
So, there's a few things that aggravate me, but if I was constantly aggravated, I wouldn't do this. Right? If I was constantly aggravated, I wouldn't do this.
Passionate, so your passion keeps you pushing through the bullshit.
No, I do this because I like it, right? But there's sometimes a rant is just a catharsis, right? Sometimes we just gotta. And sometimes we rant because it's fucking hilarious, right? Sometimes I feign being annoyed by shit because it's hilarious to see Andy annoyed by shit, even though it's not all that annoying. And then there's some shit that really, really, really annoys me.
You do realize that we all sit back and watch you online and wish we had an Andy decoder ring so that we could know 100%. Like, that every time you post something online, we have to roll the magic dice to go, is he serious or is he fucking yanking our chain? And I need that magic 8-ball to know.
Sometimes if I get a notification that Andy's in on a topic, like you see the question posed and you're like, oh shit, that's a dumb question. And then you see Andy chime in. That's when I start. I tear my ACL running into the comments.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been in Facebook jail this week, and I only saw one post that freaked me out, where I was like, I got to find a way to post, but there was no way. There was no way for me to do it because it was in a group and whatever. So I sent the two moderators. I sent two of the moderators, the admins of the group. I'm like, dude, you guys got to take this down. And that was yet another one of these moronic posts in what is now an industry trade association, or trying to be an industry trade association, which is basically a price fixing thread. I'm like, does anybody in this industry know what the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1931 is? Does anyone know that you should not have this conversation? Does anyone know that all it takes is a strip mall lawyer from Reseda and you guys will be in fucking federal court? It's just like, stop already. Chris Cook tried to redirect them in the most professional way ever, and they mocked him. And I was ready to like fucking explode on these people, but I was in fucking Facebook jail and I couldn't. So anyway, whatever. But
more stories like that the next time we have you on.
Yeah, we'll just have to start screenshotting them and putting them in a folder so we can revisit all of them with Andy.
There you go.
Maybe I can go through some of my YouTube comment questions, like the dumbest fucking ones that I get, and then I'll read them off to Andy and have him answer the question.
So don't do the dumbest ones, because this is not a.
I know. It's just fun. It's just fun. I love seeing you animated. It's so much fun.
Find the ones that are the most wrong-headed, right? Not the stupid ones, but the ones that purport themselves to be like so far past. I get this all the time. Oh yeah, that's Andy. There are a couple of dudes on the DIY mobile audio forum who just love to poo-poo me because they're so far advanced, and Andy's like this commercial dude who's like selling $40 speakers and shit. And then we'll get through this long ass, basically an argument about what works and what doesn't work and whatever else. And then there'll be a picture. He'll post a picture of some shit he's working on. And it's literally looks like somebody chopped up a piece of MDF with a garden hoe and covered it with liquid nails. And then there's like part of a windshield in the picture somewhere. I'm like, I'm arguing with this one. I'm arguing with this. Anyway, whatever. I'm going to bed, you guys. Good night.
All right.
All right.
Well, have a good
See ya.
night. Thank you, Andy.